told me that apparently there are still like 10 people missing.
Okay, in the courtroom, nobody here.
So we should wait at the lift until they arrive and then take place in the big thing, yeah? Alessia? Yvonne Velasquez is coming soon.
Okay, shall we go and sit down? Okay, shall we go and sit down now, please? Okay. All right? We are live. Sorry?
Where's the slides?
Where's what?
The slides.
Oh, I'll change this. Hold on. Can you hold this for me?
I think someone will be sitting there. I'm just going to, before I start, quickly go next door and make sure that their stream's working for in here.
He told me that it's working, Jonathan.
Yeah? Okay.
It's okay, I'll hold it. Thank
Got
you.
it?
If you go there and you give me a thumbs up, maybe?
I'll quickly go, yeah. Just so
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start very soon. We are just waiting for the signal to start the web streaming. Just waiting for the technicians to give you the go-ahead, and then we'll start. James? Okay, so we are all set, and we are now going to start. Okay? So, Michel and Donna, we are delighted to have you here today. I would like to invite you to cut the ribbon to declare this room open.
First time lucky.
First time.
Not so lucky. Trying.
Well done. Perfect. Well done. Thank you. And if you would like to maybe wait here, and we would like to unveil the plaque that is in honor of your work that you have done for us over the years and over all your life. We are inspired by what you have done for us, and look at all these people, they're all here for you too. So this is a plaque that will be on the wall from Tuesday. So when we walk in, we will think of you every day.
Merci, Danielle. I'm most grateful. And I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would you like to take a seat? I'm going to sit here.
So I'll take this bit out now, yeah?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Michel.
I keep lighting the microphone, but it doesn't like me.
Okay, so we look forward to your speech in a few minutes' time. But first, I'm going to address our audience and give a few words. Is that all right?
That's fine, but I was trying the microphone as one does.
And it's working well. Michalina, thank you for making today a memorable day. I look forward to your speech in a few minutes. But today, it is also a very special day for our interpreting students on the MA Conference Interpreting. Actually, it is their very first day on the course. So I would like to invite you to wish them well with a round of applause. Today we are celebrating what we have achieved in the last 15 years, and this is why we have invited our graduates since 2004. But we are not celebrating alone. We are celebrating with our online community. The event is web streamed on our YouTube channel, Interpreting at London Met. We hope that many online colleagues make the most of this event to practice their interpreting skills. We have a hashtag called Interpret with us. It is now quite well known, and it is known as an invitation to collaborate, to share resources, to maximize interpreting practice for our students, but also for interpreting graduates around the world. You will notice, if you're online, that the quality of our web streaming has greatly improved today, thanks to our new technology. I would like to thank Jonathan for that. He's actually hiding right over there in booth 6. Happy practice to our online community. You matter to us. We continuously learn from the past, but it is what we make of the past that inspires the present and the future that matter. Today, it is about celebrating success, partnerships, collaboration, and of course, the journey of our graduates entering the interpreting profession. Not just the conference interpreting profession, but also, and this is very dear to my heart, the public service interpreting profession. This is why we are delighted to welcome Clarissa Carvalho, Interpreting Service Manager from Freedom from Torture, and Mike Orloff, Director of the National Register for Public Service Interpreting. Our new facilities are outstanding. We know that. But what are new facilities without the people, without a vision, without a strong desire to embrace the future with confidence? Well, today, there is no shortage of people. Actually, there are 100 people here today, 24 speakers around the table, 12 interpreters in the booth, interpreting into Spanish, Italian, Chinese, Japanese, English, and Polish. In addition, there are 24 new students, then our graduates and colleagues from the university. Most of our graduates are sitting in the adjacent courtroom where they can follow the event live. But let's not forget that today, ladies and gentlemen, it is also St. Jerome's Day, also known as the International Translation Day. It is a great honor to enjoy our translation colleagues who have supported us throughout this journey. There is a special person I would like to particularly thank, and this is my colleague, Eva Jasinska-Davidson. She has been as steady as a rock for today's preparation, believe me. If you carefully look where I'm sitting, you would realize that I'm sitting between two deans. John Gabriel on my left-hand side. When John was my dean, I felt supported, appreciated, and valued. On my right, Christos Kalantaridis, my current dean, who is new to the university. But his presence here today shows how committed he is to our success, and I would like to thank him. The support of our senior management team is essential. It is an essential partnership. I am delighted to welcome our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Donna Whitehead, for her support. But let's talk about our programme. It has been carefully designed around 4 themes. Allow me to guide you through, thanks to the NewRiver Span software that is now replacing our whiteboards. As you can see, there is no whiteboard. So on the screen, you can see that our programme has been divided into 4 themes. The first one is celebrating a lifetime commitment to the interpreting profession. And you will see that Michalina will actually give us a speech. Then the second theme is setting up quality standards for the interpreting profession. And here we are delighted to welcome our professional associations. When lawyers meet interpreters, as you can see here, we are in the interpreting suite, but next to us there is a mock court. And the mock court is essential. On this photo, it represents a group of Turkish interpreters who carried out a research trying to figure out if the quality of interpretation was better when interpreting in court with and without equipment, trying to make a case for that. Then this is a photo of our students going to the Court of Justice of the European Union in Luxembourg. And you can see that there they met legal interpreters as well. Then we will enter our third theme called collaborating in a digital age. As you know, we are coming from Moorgate, and here are a few pictures of our interpreting suite in Moorgate. And as you can see, from the wires, there's quite a lot of DIY, you know, but basically it did work. It may have been a kind of spaghetti junction, but, you know, it is definitely something that we made work. So we were very sad to leave Moorgate and the city, but we were also delighted to move forward, as one of my interpreting graduates, who now works as an interpreter for ECOVAS, was able to get our old interpreting system in these boxes that you can see, to take with him to the Ivory Coast, where he will start his own company, own conference interpreting management company. It is quite a tradition, as about 10 years ago, the first interpreting system that we had, the Danish interpretation system, was actually offered to the University of Ghana, where a conference interpreting course was able to start. Then you're going to see a few photos, and you are going to recognize a few faces around this table. And I would like to really underline this amazing collaboration between Reflex here with Jag, and Sam is here. Also with our colleagues from BUK Solution, and of course London Metropolitan University. Mark is here. Where are you, Mark? You're here, and you were also a colleague when we set up the first interpreting suite in 2004. So it's quite a journey. So this is where we started from, in this building here, and you can see how the booths were built. And you can see here as well, you know, that colleagues, Jonathan, Mark, were here. Also, David McGee, head of estate, that I would like to thank particularly for his help here in the building. So loads of testing, loads of technicians, and loads of suspense as well. Then we will move on to our fourth theme, called From Interpreting Students to Professionals, a community of practice approach. It is very important that the voice of our interpreters is heard, and this is a photo representing our graduates who were ambassadors on the interpreting schemes and who completed the Advanced Conference Interpreting course. They gave us 30 hours of their time to help the new students, and in exchange we gave them access to this interpreting course for free. So you can see that once they graduate, they meet, and this is a photo doing interpreting assignments, when London Met graduates form a small family. Finally, we will move on to partnership with employers, and here I am delighted to report that our students go to the European Commission for dummy booth practice, to the International Maritime Organization, and Paolo is here next to me. He will speak on behalf of the International Maritime Organization. We also take our students to Geneva, to the United Nations, and this is a great privilege. But we also have wonderful speakers who represent the private sector. And on my left, Evie represents Uncle, and you can see her explaining quite a lot of special tips, strategies to our students about marketing, and we are delighted about that. And then next to Evie, here is Elaine from the RWS Language Solutions, coming to our students to actually, you organize a wonderful activities around the team building. That was really, really great. We will end our session today at 5 o'clock with a glass of Prosecco in the mock court. And it is not all. Our students will then meet together for the party that will start at 6 o'clock until 9 o'clock. And we are following a special tradition, as all our students and graduates brought a dish from their own country. It is something that we do every single year, and this year it will be really special. So here I am. I hope that you now understand what's going to happen today. I'm now going to give the floor to our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Donna Whitehead. But before I do that, or as you speak, I'm going to change the screen and the canvas on the screen. Sorry. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donna Whitehead, and I have the privilege of being the Deputy Vice-Chancellor at this wonderful university. As part of my role, I work with staff and students to ensure that everyone who walks through the door at this university receives an outstanding learning experience. And I also have the pleasure of attending events like this one today. I'd first of all like to thank you all for having me here today. I've been very much looking forward to this event. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, supporting the important work of the interpreting discipline at this university. A particular warm welcome to our alumni and our partners. We see working in partnership as crucial to our success. Working in partnership with like-minded organisations and individuals makes us collectively stronger. Thank you for all of your support. We are here, of course, to celebrate the opening of this superb facility. And I hope it goes some way to show the importance of interpreting as a discipline to the university. Interpreting has historically been important to London Met, and moving forward it will be even more so. What the talented team has demonstrated over the years is a commitment to providing a first-class student experience that translates into first-class outcomes for our graduates. This new facility will enable the team to continue doing a fantastic job. And I'd really like to thank, in particular, Danielle and Eva for just a superb collective team effort around this discipline. Our new university strategy is about enabling all students to succeed, regardless of background. It also focuses on us undertaking impactful work that really benefits the region and the rest of the world. Interpreting sits perfectly within our new strategy, and it's very much part of the London Met offer going forward. There is huge opportunity to grow and extend our number of partners, and I look forward to supporting the team to deliver on their ambitions. The other aspect of this room, of course, is that it provides students and organisations with a fantastic learning experience. It's real-world experience, and that's what's really important to this university. I'm absolutely thrilled that we've called the interpreting suite the Michalina Ageros Interpreting Suite. What better person to name it after? We want our London Met graduates to be determined, tenacious, resilient, creative, adaptable, and ambitious. Everything that Professor Ageros is. It's what we stand for at London Metropolitan University. So thank you, Michalina, for being part of our journey and for kindly agreeing to us calling this facility in your name. Finally, I hope you all enjoy the afternoon. I'm sure it will be a special time for everyone sat around this table, in the courtroom and around as well. On behalf of the senior leadership team at the university, I want to say congratulations to you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Donna. I would now like to give the floor to Christos Kalantaridis, who is sitting next to me and who will say a few words on behalf of the faculty.
Thank you, Daniel. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to all stakeholders here present that represent the multiple facets of the interpreting profession. I'm particularly pleased to see here that we have students starting the MA Conference Interpreting program and interpreting graduates from 2004 up until now. I'm particularly pleased to welcome Professor Boss, General Secretary of CUT, where we are very proud to be a member. The fact that we are here today is evidence, firstly, of the very strong relationships between the university and the professional associations, employers, and networks for both conference interpreting and public service interpreting. Also, we are here today because of the resilience of the academic team here at London Metropolitan University, and I would like to say particular thank you to Danielle and Eva for the excellent work that they have done to prepare both today, but also keeping the discipline progressing at the university. And lastly, we're here today because of the decision of London Metropolitan University to invest in order to achieve excellence in interpreting education, which is really important to us. Interpreting sits within the School of Business and Law. And you will see later today how we can make the connection between law and interpreting. And we are also having plans in order to establish connections between the bulk of our provision in business and business negotiation and interpreting. So I'm really looking forward to a very productive conversation today, and welcome again to the university.
Thank you very much, Christos. I think we are all waiting for this moment, Michel. You will notice that I call Michalina Michel because we speak French all the time when we're together, and she's also known as Michel to me and to many of us as well. So, Michel, it is now time for us to listen to you carefully, and I'm very much looking forward to what you have to tell us.
Danielle, you have just stolen the first sentences of my speech. Well, I was going to tell you that Michalina is a Polish first name, and that my married name was initially Greek and was then anglicized as Ageros. Well, now everybody has said that, and Danielle added all those things I was going to say at the beginning. So what do? I just move on rapidly. Oh yes, I interrupt myself and I say, of course, I was told I should speak English because we are in London and it's a new lingua franca, but my main language is, my mother tongue is Polish, okay, but my main working language has been French. And as I went to school in France and then to university, and people find that out when they live in foreign countries. They are liked better if they have a name that everybody can pronounce. And so I had a choice between being Michalina, which sounds like a train or a tire, and so I became Michel, and it was quite useful, and even with people who are not as francophone as Danielle, it's sort of become a working, a sort of interpreting name for me. Anyway, unnecessary long explanation, and now I shall say the first thing I ought to have said. Well, how very grateful I am to London Metropolitan University for so generously recognizing many years of work, a sort of, well, years of teaching as well, and an interpreting career which started in 1954. So it's almost prehistory. Well, it's a very gratifying decision, but I certainly didn't expect it, if only because my determination to work and the luck I've enjoyed were not exceptional at the time. I mean, I belong to a generation of interpreters who are lucky to survive the Second World War, especially since many of them were refugees. And after, well, the traumas of the Cold War, and let's move on, and then the technological change which really transformed how interpreting was done. And so, you know, I was certainly no different from many, and probably I'm quite typical of that generation. So I'd like to think that we are paying a tribute not to one of its members, but to a generation. Therefore, speaking as I should perhaps to the students, I hope they will remember the past, because, well, we lived in rather dramatic times and also managed complicated technological change, and they may well have to do. Their time is coming. The times might be hard. Let them be ready. This is an excuse for going on about history. Temptation, I find it increasingly hard to resist at my age. History, that of interpreting. I think people have always, some people, had to turn one language into another because they lived in border areas or because they lived during foreign invasions, and somehow they did it. So that wasn't a profession. As a profession, interpreting is relatively recent, but already has a sort of eventful history. In the First World War, interpreters made possible communication between allies, especially those allies who, not being Europeans, didn't know diplomatic language. And then they facilitated the negotiations of the Treaty of Versailles, which ended that war and very successfully prepared the next one. Moving on, that is when interpreting replaced the tradition of there being a language everybody shared. Initially, of course, Latin, later, for a while, French, and instead the instrument of international relations, intergovernmental relations in particular, became interpreting. A number of intergovernmental organizations were created after World War I, and they used interpreters, having several working languages. And then, well, okay, I should say that at the time, consecutive was the mode of interpreting. So someone made a speech, and an interpreter memorized it, more or less successfully, generally very well, perhaps with the help of a few notes, and then just made the same speech loud and clear in another language. And that's how we used to work. Certainly in the 50s, most certainly for a large part of the 60s. However, technology changed, and instruments became available which permitted interpreting to be simultaneous. Well, we've got simultaneous here and now. The machines that existed then were, of course, nowhere near as reliable, but gradually they were improved, and also it became quite obvious after World War II that new intergovernmental institutions were going to use more languages, and there would be more such institutions, and so there would be a demand for more interpreters. Suddenly, the idea occurred at long last that it might be quite a good idea to train them, to teach them what they were going to do, because the founding fathers, the people whose names I shall spare you, I shall quote no names, but they are still remembered, and some wrote manuals which are still possibly not read, but certainly quoted, and as they even thought perhaps the next generation would be better off with some training. Some of the founding fathers started teaching a bit of interpreting in Geneva, but a major change, well, what at least strikes me for obvious reasons, as a major change, was when Paris University decided in 1953 to launch a course for interpreting in the academic year 53-54, which is the course I attended. Well, times have changed. There was only one university in Paris. Incredible now. There are universities all over the area. Never mind that. So one had to organize that course. It was unprecedented. To emphasize the contrast, at the very start of the present century, AIC, the International Association of Conference Interpreters, had listed about 40 interpreting courses which were at the right level, with the right standards. But all in all, there were already some 100 such courses. Not as good, but there were 100 courses in the world. So times are now different, very different. Let's look around. Anyway, at this stage, one has to emphasize the contrast. We have to look around. Possibly some people actually listen, and I must say a few words about how the course I attended in Paris was organized. It was a university course, but not academic enough for the Sorbonne to find room for it at all. So we were located in a secondary establishment, a lycée. Therefore, our teaching hours, only on weekdays, had to be between 6 and 8 p.m. because the pupils had to clear the building first. And we had a classroom, and it had a blackboard. And that was it. I mean, no instruments. The teacher had to bring whatever was deemed necessary for simultaneous. It was, I think, called a magnetophone then. And also he brought a microphone, and that was that. And we practiced putting our overcoats over our heads so we could all speak at once. Now, firstly, we didn't do that very often because consecutive did not require instruments, and because we knew, and we were right, that that was how we would work after graduating. And indeed, that was the case for years. In addition, just to round off this particular recall, well, the only room at the time, I'm saying 53, 54, which was equipped with booze in Paris was in UNESCO. UNESCO was then in a former hotel. The present ambitious modern building did not exist. So we did mainly consecutive and manage a bit, as I said, of simultaneous in passing. Now let's talk about languages. The two young interpreters, obviously self-trained, they had no experience, having never been taught. Well, they taught. Their languages were French and English, and that was that. No other language was considered at all. The thought did occur. People did think about the future, you know. It's just that they didn't anticipate its shape. But they thought some languages would really probably be used in conferences. So if students wished to, they could be examined, not taught, just examined at the end of the year in German, Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese. Brazilian was always the country of the future. Well, now it is the threat for the future. Never mind. I should probably add, just to add a touch of local color, that the people who would assess them in those exams would be diplomats from the respective embassies of those countries. Just like that. However, for English and French, well, we had one of the first interpreters of the League of Nations, one of the founding fathers of interpreting, to assess us. And that's who assessed me, of course. Right. So there we were. So much about languages. That meant it didn't occur to me that Polish, well, could be ever one of my working languages, or even a conference language at all. Actually, yes, I did eventually do the Polish booth before the end of the last century, because the map of Europe, I think that's how one says it actually, the map of Europe was redesigned. Things changed. And European institutions began to discuss the accession, and then a little later the new membership of countries formerly described as Eastern European, but now, when they're being good, considered as Central European. Unfortunately, they are not always as good as one or as I might wish. Well, the future might alter such things, but perhaps it's not a very nice time at the moment to talk about the future. So we'll move on, and we'll just say something general, like political upheavals as well as technological change managed to transform interpreting, some about how it was done, some about in what languages it was done, and we became more and more aware that the past was another country and things were done differently then. But although things are so remarkably advanced now, we should remember that we are only at a particular stage of development. So the future will be yet another country, and things will be done differently. And we can assume, well, we don't know how it will be done, but we can assume that artificial intelligence will most certainly have an impact on the interpreting profession and on many other professions and on life in general. And now that begins thinking of my fellow interpreters in the booth, there comes that moment when they think, I remember thinking, can't be far from the conclusion. We're not. What a relief. And the other horrible thing which happens, I will spare them, but a really horrible thing is when the speaker says, in conclusion, and then goes on and on. They always do. However, I am just about to conclude, but I will say that it's a temptation, if only because of the close relationship between science fiction and science fact, that we can kind of speculate about, nice little machines. There are already some little machines that do it, turn words from one language into another. So robots doing that, well, how does one react to that? With any change, there are always the pessimists who say, well, things will be very bad. They'll get worse, and all that. They've said it about every new machine since industrialization began. So they will say that. Optimists in the past used to hope for progress. But now progress is a word that one doesn't believe in, does one? So optimists will just say, in the past, fears about what is happening have always been exaggerated. Perhaps they are again. So what, really concluding, is that what realists say, I don't know. I don't know how one can be a realist now. So I shall really conclude by quoting T.S. Eliot, the poet, in case people in the booth were not literary inclined. Well, he said, as one gets older, the future becomes stranger. It does.
Thank you very much, Michelle. Thank you so much for such an inspiring speech, Michelle. We are delighted to have you for the whole day, so I'm sure many people will come to you and talk about, what it was like to interpret from under the coat, That's definitely. We're now moving on to the second part of our day, of our afternoon, and we are looking at quality standards for the interpreting profession. And I'm delighted to welcome Monika Kokoszewska, representing AIC, International Conference Interpreting, and she's the advisory board member of the UK and Ireland. So, Monika, here is your slide. You can start speaking when you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, Michalina. My name is Monika Kokoszewska, and I'm here to tell you about the International Association of Conference Interpreters, commonly known by its French acronym, AIC. But before I do that, as head of the UK and Ireland region of AIC, I would like to thank you. I would like to thank London Metropolitan University for inviting AIC here today. And especially, I'd like to thank Danielle and Eva. You've been brilliant, and you've prepared it very, very well, and we're very impressed. And on behalf of AIC, I would like to congratulate you on the truly impressive new facilities. When I saw who the suite was named after, I was very moved. I've known, respected, and admired Michalina for many, many years. She's an inspiration, and she's been a constant here in the UK, in our region, life. And ladies and gentlemen, you might need your headphones now, as I am going to say the next sentence in my mother tongue, and Michalina's. Pani Michalino, ja Pani bardzo serdecznie dziękuję za to, że możemy zawsze na Panią liczyć. Dziękuję za wszystkie mądre rady i za te wspaniałe historie.
So can you please
Odwzajemniam podziękowania, zapomniałam o mikrofonie, ale zobaczymy się w przyjemniejszych okazjach niż teraz.
Ta jest bardzo przyjemna.
To się cieszę. I think there's been quite enough Polish.
There's never enough of Polish. Michalina has been a member of AIK since 1960. I checked that. She was one of the trailblazers, and AIK was founded in 1953, when conference interpreting was still a fledgling profession. And back then, the association had just a few dozen members. Today, it brings together around 3,000 professional interpreters from every continent. We are headquartered in Geneva, but the association is global. It's the only global association of professional conference interpreters. As you know, in this profession, there is no formal recognition. We're not lawyers. We're not doctors. So membership of AIK is widely regarded as the gold standard, synonymous with high quality and professionalism, although it may sound a bit immodest. Membership means that you have undertaken to abide by a set of professional and ethical standards, developed and continuously updated by the association. Those standards are designed to ensure that interpreters are able to provide a high-quality service. When the first AIK president, André Kaminka, was asked to contribute to the drafting of a code of honor of AIK, he scribbled something on a piece of paper and said, "Here is your code of honor." And there was only one sentence there. Conference interpreters are bound by the strictest secrecy. Even though confidentiality has remained the most important principle in AIK's Code of Ethics, nowadays this code contains many more sentences. And together with AIK's professional standards, it spells out requirements on issues such as the composition of interpreting teams, access to documents, the position of the booth, sound quality, etc. And these codes form the basis for AIK's negotiations with international organizations such as the European Union and the United Nations on interpreters' working conditions and remuneration. In fact, this year AIK celebrated the 50th anniversary of its agreement with the UN. Quality interpretation depends on more than an individual interpreter's knowledge and skills. Working conditions and the quality of the interpreting equipment will affect your performance. For example, if the interpreter is working alone for more than around 30 minutes in the booth, they will no longer be able to do an excellent job, however well-trained and experienced they are. And what if the sound quality is poor? Or if the booths are placed behind a pillar or screen? Think of a Formula One racing driver. He can only exploit the full potential of his driving skills if the car is perfectly engineered and his support team makes the right tactical decisions. And an interpreter can only deliver top quality performance if the working conditions are optimal. AIK supports ongoing research on how to optimize working conditions. We offer advice to planners and architects of new conference centers, and in cooperation with ISO, the International Standards Organization, we define the standards on the provision of interpreting services and equipment. We also closely follow developments in new technologies mentioned here by Michalina. For example, remote interpreting is on everyone's lips nowadays. AIK set up a special task force to draft guidelines on remote interpreting, now available online, and define the associated working conditions. And many questions need answering here. For example, is the alienation effect in remote real or perceived? What about increased cognitive load? Finally, and this brings me back to the reason for our gathering here today, AIK promotes good training practices by listing interpreting schools which meet certain requirements in its schools directory. And London Metropolitan is, of course, one of those schools. And once students have graduated, AIK is there to offer help and advice to newcomers to the profession. In concluding, I'd like to share with you what membership of AIK has meant to me. Our profession is international by nature, and AIK is present throughout the world. When moving to another country, you take your membership with you. When I moved to London from Warsaw back in 2007, I knew I'd be welcomed by other AIC colleagues, and I would not be starting from scratch. It mattered a lot to someone like me, you see, a girl born behind the Iron Curtain, for whom languages were a gateway to the world. I remember my first proper international assignment with all those amazing interpreters from abroad. I asked one of them for a business card, and she said, I'm sorry, I didn't bring any, but you'll find me in the book. And I said, what book? Well, she was referring to the Blue Book, as we call it in AIC, the paper directory of all AIC interpreters around the world. Nowadays, the directory is, of course, also available online. And back then, I thought to myself, I too want to be in that Blue Book. And I made it into the book, and here I am, and I really hope that the students here will join us one day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Monica. I'm now turning to my left to look at a dear colleague and friend as well from CUT. Christos mentioned CUT earlier on. So, Lieven, you've got the floor, and I hope you're going to enlighten us as to what CUT means. What kind of acronym is it? What does it mean, you know? Tell us.
Merci bien. Et tout d'abord, je suis tellement ravi d'être ici. Je vous remercie de m'avoir invité à cette occasion et je vous remercie aussi pour cet accueil tellement chaleureux. And now I will continue in English, obviously. I could go on, but I only have 5 minutes, unfortunately. If I get more, then I would go on in French. No, thank you very much for having me. And indeed, I'm here representing CUT, which is actually a French acronym. We are an association of interpreting and translator trainer institutions, mainly universities, which means that we indeed believe that it is a good idea to train interpreters as well as translators. Not only a good idea, but an excellent idea. The topic of this part of the event is about professional standards, and we believe, obviously, that good professional standards start with excellent training of interpreters, because they are the ones setting the standard in real life, in actual practice, even though perhaps the ideal standards, as AIC, for instance, has elaborated them, are not always as attainable as one should like. Now, we believe that profession and training meet in the concept of graduate employability, which is something that we've been looking at very closely in recent years, because we believe it is our duty to our students. After all, we are training them not for a happy life on the beach, but rather for earning their keep, basically. But it's also a duty to society, because society needs interpreters, society needs translators, needs these multilingual bridges. But also society obviously pays for a large part of the training of our students. So we have to give something back, give a quid pro quo, as it were. Now, one may wonder sometimes whether our graduates are still useful. Some politicians, for instance, do ask that kind of question. After all, you've got technology these days, and you've got an increasing number of people in society who are indeed multilingual. And there is this mistaken assumption that as soon as you can speak 2 languages, you can also do some interpreting and get by just fine. But when our interpreters launch themselves into the market, they find themselves in quite a volatile market. Volatile in many different ways, in terms of demands, in terms of activities that are asked of them. For instance, recently I was talking to someone who said that they were asking interpreters to do a lot of re-speaking as well. Which might be very interesting in terms of an additional activity for them, but which also requires them to, make some kind of a mental switch to a different kind of activity, because this is not what interpreters have been trained to do. So this is something that interpreters have to be aware of, and that we as training institutions believe we should also train them to be prepared for. Not just train them to be prepared for the ideal situation of conference interpreting, but also all sorts of other needs that they may need to cater for in the labour market. Which also means that we really need to make them aware of the fact that interpreters might be the epitome of the multitasking professional, being able to juggle different languages, but also juggle different activities at the same time, juggle different parts of their brain at the same time, and also juggle technology these days. All of that brought together in one person, often in one and the same spot, one and the same moment. Which also means that we need to teach them academic skills. As Michel said, for instance, many decades ago, interpreting was not seen as a true branch of the academic sphere. Today, thank God for that, things have changed, and we can see that academia is feeding into the training of our students, but just as well is also making sure that our students get some kind of a different mindset, an inquisitive mindset. They have to be corpus linguists as well as very good translators, interpreters. They have to be language experts, but just as well terminologists, for instance. They have to be data miners as well as language experts. Now, if you look at this from the other perspective, the mirror perspective perhaps, that of the industry, you can see that things might become a bit more blurred. One of the challenges that we are facing, or that our students, our graduates are facing, is that you have quite a diverse sector. What is the interpreting sector? The interpreting sector in itself is quite homogeneous perhaps, but they are doing a lot of assignments for a very diverse set of sectors, and all of these have different expectations. For conference interpreting, for instance, you can already see different actors at play, but then if you broaden the scope to business interpreting and even further to court interpreting, to public service interpreting, then things can get very dire sometimes. What about languages of lesser diffusion that we don't necessarily teach in our universities, but that we do feel obliged to somehow cater for, if only because society requires this? Then again, does society really require this? If you listen to certain politicians, for instance, there may be no need. People should simply learn the language, and then they will be able to cater for their own language needs without the help of some kind of an intermediary in between languages like interpreters. Which means that very often you get very poor remuneration. And, well, you know how the saying goes, if you pay peanuts, then you get, well, you know how it goes. Which means that the market that our students, our graduates are working in is sometimes really under pressure, and it is up to them to show some kind of a resilience in order to constantly reinvent themselves, as it were. Show that they are the ones who can really make things happen in the labour market, in the different sectors in which they are engaged, in order to make communication possible. If we train them well, then they will probably be the best advocates of what I'm saying here. We need interpreters. The best way of showing that is to have great interpreters doing this in real-world situations on the spot. That is the only way in which we can move forward. What is the role of CUT in all that? Well, basically, we want to bring together universities, we want to disseminate good practices, we want to pool good practices and also develop them. For instance, we've done some work in pooling research efforts. We're also now looking into developing knowledge clips for training, which will be disseminated quite widely, not only to our own members, but much broader. We, of course, also want to keep abreast of developments in the labour market to see whether we can really inform our own members in terms of what they should prepare for. And of course, we also want to raise awareness among all actors in terms of the need to establish and uphold professional standards in the many different sectors in which our graduates are employed. Finally, in conclusion, but not really concluding, just as a way of rounding off, congratulations to London Metropolitan University. You are really at the forefront of innovation in this respect, not only in terms of this wonderful conference room, but also the fact that you've been able to integrate the element of courtroom interpreting just next door is a wonderful example to us all. Congratulations and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lieven. And now to conclude our part on quality standards and professional association, I'd like to give the floor to the chair of the Institute of Translation and Interpreting, Paul Apollard. You've got the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'm conscious that there's a clock on the table in front of me, so I'll keep an eye on it. I've got that, there we go. So thank you so much for inviting me to the inauguration of this wonderful suite. The company around this table is absolutely stunning. So I'm not going to talk for too long, mainly because I can't wait to hear what everybody else has got to say. But I'm going to tell you a very little bit about the ITI, which is the Institute of Translation and Interpreting. Somebody said to me as I came in today, "You're quite well known, aren't you?" But the thing about being quite well known is you might not really know. You may have impressions, but they may not be quite right. So the ITI is based in sunny Milton Keynes, and it is the only UK-based independent professional membership association for practicing translators, interpreters and language service businesses. It's all under the same roof. So translators, interpreters and language services businesses, so professionals, people who make a living out of translation and interpreting rather than the more general catch-all of linguist. The ITI was founded in 1986 and we've got over 3,000 members both in the UK and internationally. 20% of our members are outside the UK. So we've got to reach outside, not as international as AIC, which has got the I in their name, but we are an international organisation and we seek to promote the highest standards in the profession, supporting our members through webinars, through training. We have an extremely popular conference which is massively oversubscribed, and some of you have been to various versions of our conferences at different times in different places. And we represent our industry at the very top level in parliamentary groups and in cross-industry forums. We produce a range of products and services, both to our membership and to those who require the professional services of our members. And we act as an interface between government, the industry, commerce, the media, and the general public. That's what we try and do anyway. We've got corporate members, language service businesses, who provide a range of services across languages, and we have corporate education members, which are certain higher education establishments in the UK and abroad as well, who offer courses in translation, interpreting, modern languages. We've got all of those things. We've got corporate, affiliate and individual supporter members who are not practicing translators and interpreters or language businesses, but who would in many cases like to be. In terms of quality standards, ITI members who are translators are able to apply for ISO 17100, which is a way of demonstrating their commitment to working at the highest standard, and all our members are encouraged to work actively on their CPD, and they are encouraged also to follow a particular career path. We can go from associate to member to fellow. We've got a fellow here today, at least one. And we work with industry partners who are also represented here to promote standards and educate buyers on the error of aiming low. In other words, pay cheap, pay twice. Touches back on what you say. It's really interesting that we are able to work with people who are represented around this table, because by working together, the reference to the Formula One car over there, a Formula One car has one driver, but there are dozens of people behind that car and that driver who are working together to get everything to work. We work with organisations such as the gentleman to my right, other organisations who are here or who aren't here to promote the higher standard, because by working together we can really ensure that We promote standards. By promoting standards, we promote professionalism, and we become more professional by doing all of that together. Now, we were told to say a few words in another language, so I'm going to do that now. I'm going to put headphones on, so I don't know what I'm going to say. French, for the interpreters in the room. Je suis ravi d'être ici. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité. C'est vraiment une salle formidable. Ça me donne envie de reprendre mes études. Donc, qui sait, après mes 3 années d'être président de l'ITI, je vais peut-être reprendre mes études ici. On ne sait jamais. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Paul. Mais vous avez vraiment notre... nous serions ravis de vous avoir en tant qu'étudiant. Donc, c'est comme vous voulez. Hein, vraiment, vous êtes le bienvenu. So this concludes our section on quality standards and professional associations. I'd like to say that the booths that you see around you were all designed and made according to the AIC standards. And that's quite important. So you can see that we've applied this quality standard straight here in this room. I'd like also to say that my husband is hiding somewhere in booth number 6. And this morning he asked me, which badge shall I wear, my AIC pin or my Fellow of the ITI pin? And he decided to wear them both, actually. So, yes, promoting quality standards, that's absolutely vital. Let's now move on to our next section. And this is very exciting. It's about when lawyers meet interpreters. And I'm delighted to welcome Barry Goldstone, who is here with us. Barry, I know that you've got quite a few surprises for us. In a few minutes, I'm going to put your presentation PowerPoint on the screen. But right now, we can see a photo of you that I managed to find. So we are going to be able to bring the courtroom in this room. So they're going to be live in a few minutes. But you can start speaking whilst I'm putting the PowerPoint presentation on for you. Is that all right? Thank you.
Good. Hello, I'm Barry Goldstone. I'm delighted to be the head of the law school here. And thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this excellent event, particularly to look at the relationship between legal profession and the interpretation profession. I didn't know I was meant to speak in a second language, but I shall speak in the language of the law. So I hope that... I hope that counts. And that's almost the point of this talk, actually, that the language of the law is not necessarily the same as normal English, which is what provides a particular challenge, I think, to legal interpreters. So I'm going to give a short talk, firstly, about some of those challenges, the challenges interpreters may face in dealing with some very strange and nuanced language used by legal professionals. And then the exciting bit, we're going to have a live demonstration of a court case given by some of my amazing law students who will be simultaneously interpreted by the brilliant interpretation students. And I would mention this is a new type of collaboration between the law school and the interpretation school, enabled by the new technology and by the physical proximity of the courtroom to the interpretation suite. Daniel and I both regard this as a massive step forward, and we hope to both sides, both the law school and the interpretation school, will benefit enormously from this new collaboration. So, that was just busking while ready. I don't know how to do this.
They have on the side.
Okay. Good. So, when lawyers meet interpreters, the need for legal interpreters is actually massive. A large number of cases in the UK courts involve foreign nationals who need the proceedings interpreted. This isn't just because the United Kingdom and London in particular is so cosmopolitan. We're not just talking about litigants who are from foreign countries, although there are a lot of those too. But England is often the jurisdiction of choice for major commercial agreements, especially those involving shipping, even if none of the parties are from the United Kingdom. One reason for this transnational preference for using English law in maritime contracts is that English commercial courts have always adopted the pragmatic view that the purpose of contract law is to give effect to reasonable commercial expectation. So they understand, in a way that other jurisdictions don't, that they need to change the law according to modern commercial practice. And as part of this remit, the courts do not just consider the strict principles laid out in judicial precedents, as some people think they do. They think the common law means you have to follow slavishly earlier cases, but they are responsive to the reasonable commercial expectations of the parties. And the Supreme Court in particular has shown itself willing to adapt or even alter the law to match those expectations. We've seen very recently how the Supreme Court can come up with quite surprising decisions to match reasonable expectation, in some people's view, rather than following the strict law. A common way for the courts to shift legal paradigms without overtly overruling or disparaging earlier decisions is to reinterpret the language used by earlier judges. They claim that they have discovered what they really meant, or would have meant if only they had had the situation that they have in front of them now. And this is the issue, I think, for interpreters, because words used in cases 50 years ago may be used with a quite different meaning in modern cases. And the judges will make no excuse for that. They will just say this is what that word always meant. And the problem that might cause to interpreters is that in order to achieve and justify the desirable commercial outcome to a particular case, whilst supposedly maintaining the respect for precedent, the courts will use highly nuanced language and not necessarily with the meanings that they have in the dictionary or even with the meanings used by earlier courts. And in such case, a translation will not do. The interpreters have to work out what is the court actually talking about and probably interpret it in a way which doesn't use the old language. I'm going to give you a little test now, just to illustrate this, and this will be particularly interesting for people who speak other languages where the words are not so nuanced. So here's the first question. What single word means the same as likely? Okay, I'll give you the answer. Most people would say probable. Likely, probable. Now, it is possible, in some languages, there isn't a distinction between those two words. What is the opposite of likely? Well, unlikely. What is the opposite of probable? Improbable. By that, therefore, by syllogistic logic, unlikely and improbable should mean the same thing, but they don't. English courts would not use those words interchangeably. And this is your question. What is less likely to happen, an unlikely thing or an improbable thing? Because technically they should mean the same, of course, but the connotation is quite different. Which of these phrases would you say means the same as likely? Not unlikely. Liable to happen. Reasonably foreseeable. There is a point to this. Seriously possible. Real danger of happening. And on the cards. I hope I'm not causing the translators palpitations. Here's the point. In 1949, in the Court of Appeal, in a case called Victoria, Laundrie and Newman, the Court of Appeal said all those phrases meant exactly the same thing. 20 years later, the House of Lords said they all meant completely different things in interpreting that case, in a case called the Heron 2, which was a shipping case, an international shipping case. So where do the interpreters go with that? Well, this is what Lord Reid had to say about it in 1969. It appears to me that in the ordinary use of language, there is a wide gulf between saying that some event is not unlikely or quite likely to happen and saying merely that it is a serious possibility, a real danger, or on the cards. But how is the interpreter to know which of those many meanings it meant? And of course, if the language into which you're interpreting doesn't have that nuance, how are you meant to explain it? Just to finish on this, here are some phrases which would appear to have normal meanings, but which do not, in law, have anything like the meaning you might expect. So, start with factual causation. Now, you might think that just means, did you cause something to happen as a matter of fact? In fact, it requires a complex analysis of the objective but-for test. But for your interference, would I have been injured? But also the courts mirror that with common sense. They specifically do not use the chaos theory. They say metaphysics has no part in law. So if something is just a coincidence, you will not factually have been held to cause it. If I am driving you in a speeding car and a tree falls on the car, that is not my fault, even though had I gone slower, the tree would not have fallen on my car. That's just bad luck. That's a typical example. Legal causation, you might therefore imagine, is even more complicated. We're talking here about reasonable foreseeability, but what the courts mean is not that the type of accident was foreseeable, but merely the extent of it. So, if it is foreseeable, I would burn you, but you actually catch fire and are completely engulfed in flame, that is reasonably foreseeable as far as the courts are concerned. If it is reasonably foreseeable, I would burn you, but I actually blow you up, that is not reasonably foreseeable. How could you possibly know that unless you'd studied law? Proximity. You'd think proximity meant I was close to you. It doesn't mean that to a lawyer. Lord Nichols famously said, proximity is a slippery word. It means whatever you want it to mean. And what it actually means to a lawyer is that you have created some sort of assumption of responsibility to somebody else in a situation you may never have met this person. They may be on the other side of the world. It's got nothing to do with physical proximity. Not unreasonable does not mean the same thing as reasonable. It is quite different. Many things are reasonable to do, but it does not mean it is not unreasonable not to do them. How do you deal with a triple negative if you're trying to interpret? Policy. Policy has wide meanings anyway, but to a lawyer it means pragmatism. Certain cases are not allowed by the court simply because it would cause too many other cases to go forward. That is the main policy they're talking about, although sometimes they use it to mean we shouldn't be suing the police because they do such a good job, it'd be a shame to get in their way. Lord Reid, the university sponsor, last year said that's just nonsense, that isn't what policy means. So we've all had to rewrite our books. Common sense to a lawyer means, what does the man on the Clapham omnibus think? But what if the man on the Clapham omnibus is asked a medical question or a technical question? There's no point in asking him. We have to have another meaning for common sense in that context. And finally, condition and warranty. Condition to most people means prerequisite. To a lawyer, it means a term of the contract, breach of which is repudiatory. What is a warranty? A term of the contract, breach of which is not repudiatory, but most people translate warranty as guarantee and completely miss the point. So the point I'm making is, good luck to legal interpreters. Even with a legal dictionary, you need to know the context, because in the context, the same words can have different meanings, even within the same judgment. So, the exciting bit, the case demonstration. What we're going to do is enact for you the final moments of a very famous real-life law case. This is a case called The Crown Against Dudley and Stevens. Even that's problematic. Look at how we write it. R.V. Dudley and Stevens. No lawyer would ever say that. They would say The Crown Against. You couldn't guess that, could you? This is the terrible tale of the sea. Back in the 1880s, 4 men became shipwrecked by a storm: Thomas Dudley, Edwin Stevens, John Brooks and Richard Parker. They were forced to abandon their ship, the Mignonette, and were stranded in a small emergency boat. Once the food had run out and they'd eaten all the turtles they could catch, they turned their eyes to the cabin boy. The cabin boy was clearly dying and looked delicious, and they thought, we can't quite wait for him to die, should we just kill him anyway? Dudley and Stevens, they drew lots to see who would die, but actually one of the sailors wouldn't participate, so they just killed the cabin boy and ate him, and then they were rescued. When they were charged with murder, their defence was necessity. They said, had we not killed him, we would have died ourselves, just as surely as if someone was plunging a knife at us and we killed them to avoid the attack. So that's where we go to. So we're now going to see the end of this case to see how it panned out. Is it in fact a defence to say, I had to kill you because you were the only food source available, which was effectively their defence? Now, it's just going to take a few minutes for us to set this up, so I'm going to leave you now, but I'll see you on screen in a minute.
Okay, so as Barry's going to the mock court is going to be live, and it's going to be transferred here. So we're now in the mock court.
Thank you, Mr. James. If you'd care to complete your submissions on behalf of the Crown.
I am obliged, my lady. The question for the court today is a very simple one. Did the prisoners, Thomas Dudley and Edward Stevenson, murder Richard Parker? There is no doubt at all that they deliberately killed him. To that much they freely admit. So the case rests entirely upon whether the court is willing to accept their defence that the killing of Parker was a necessary and justifiable evil to prevent a greater one. That is, the death of them all. My lady, rather than prevent an evil, the killing was to perpetrate an even greater sin. Sordidly, to eat his flesh for their own selfish desire to survive.
Objection, my lady. The crime of which my clients stand accused is murder, not cannibalism, and however morally repugnant it may seem, eating human flesh is neither a criminal offence nor the subject of this trial.
Quite so, Mr. Collins. Mr. James, please confine your arguments to the matter at hand. We are perfectly capable of making our own moral judgments if these are deemed to be relevant.
I am obliged, my lady. With regard then to the substantial question in the case, whether the prisoners in killing Parker were guilty of murder. The law is that where a private person, acting upon his own judgments, takes the life of a fellow creature, his act can only be justified on the grounds of self-defense. Self-defense against the acts of a person whose life is taken.
My lady, with respect to my learned friend, he is second-guessing the outcome of this case. It has never been held that self-defense is confined to protecting oneself against the direct acts of the person who is killed.
My lady, if I may be permitted to finish my submission, my learned friend might withdraw his objection.
Quite so. Mr. Collins, kindly allow counsel to get through his submissions without interrupting him. You will have your chance to reply in due course.
As your ladyship pleases.
Mr. James?
I am obliged, my lady. As I was about to say, the principles of self-defense has been extended to include the case of a man killing another to prevent him from committing some great crime upon a third person. But the principle has no application to this case, for the prisoners were not acting to protect themselves against any act of Parker. If he had had food in his possession and they had taken it from him, they would have been guilty of theft. And if they had killed him to obtain his food, they would have been guilty of murder.
But does it make no difference that it is clearly they would all have died unless they killed Parker? It is surely not the same as simply murdering someone to rob them.
With respect, my lady, we would submit that killing someone to eat him is in fact far worse.
But these men were desperate with hunger.
Indeed, my lady, it appears that the prisoners were subject to a terrible temptation, to sufferings which might break down the bodily power of the strongest man, and try the conscience of the best. But nevertheless, it is clear that the prisoners put to death a weak and unoffending boy upon the chance of preserving their own lives by eating upon his flesh and blood after he was killed, and with the certainty of depriving him of any possible chance of survival.
But if the men had not fed upon the body of the boy, they would probably not have survived, and the boy being in a much weaker condition was likely to have died before them.
Just so, my lady. But they might possibly have been picked up the next day by a passing ship, or they might possibly have not been picked up at all. And in either case, it is obvious that the killing of the boy would have been an unnecessary and profitless act. The boy was incapable of resistance, and in fact, he made none. And it is not even suggested that his death was due to any violence on his part attempted against, or even so much as feared by those who killed him. In these circumstances, my lady, however much we might empathise with our prisoners, we cannot resist the conclusion that they are guilty of murder. My lady, that completes my submissions.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, would you care to make your submissions?
I'm obliged, my lady. The facts show that the prisoners were not guilty of murder at the time when they killed Mr. Parker, but killed him under the pressure of necessity. Necessity will excuse an act which would otherwise be a crime.
Really? All crimes in all circumstances?
No, my lady, but certainly this act in these circumstances. Take the case of two shipwrecked persons clinging to the same plank and one of them thrusting the other man from it, finding that it will not support them both. This homicide is excusable through unavoidable necessity and upon the greatest universal principle of self-preservation, which prompts every man to save his own life in preference to that of another, where one of them must inevitably perish. In the present case, the prisoners were in circumstances where no assistance could be given. The essence of the crime of murder is intention, and here the intention of the prisoners was only to preserve their own lives. The cases clearly show, in order to save your life, your own life rather, you may lawfully take away the life of another, even when that other is neither threatening yours nor is guilty of any illegal act, whatever, towards you or anyone else.
Objection, my lady. With respect to my learned friend, this is a gross misstatement of the law. The requisite mens rea of murder is an intention to kill, which the defendants clearly had. Their motive may act as mitigation, but this is not a defence. The defendants chose to kill the boy and then did so.
My lady, the prisoners in this case had no real choice. Kill a dying boy or be killed yourself by hunger. That is not murder. That is understandable and forgivable human frailty. We would submit that the case against them should be dismissed. My lady, that completes the case for the respondents. May I be of any further assistance?
No, but thank you for your helpful submissions.
Obliged.
We naturally have great sympathy for the plight of the prisoners cast out to sea and certain they would die unless they committed a homicide against a powerless child. But the temptation to act which exists here was not what the law has ever called a necessity, nor is it to be regretted. Though law and morality are not the same, and many things may be considered immoral, which are not necessarily illegal, yet the absolute divorce of law from morality would be of fatal consequence, and such divorce would follow if the temptation to murder in this case were to be held by the law an absolute defence of it. It is not so. To preserve one's life is generally speaking a duty, but it may be the plainest and the highest duty to sacrifice it. War is full of instances in which it is a man's duty not to live, but to die. It is not correct, therefore, to say that there is any absolute or unqualified necessity to preserve one's life. Who would be the judge of this sort of necessity? By what measure is the comparative value of lives to be measured? Is it to be strength or intellect or what? It is plain that such a principle would leave to him who is to profit by it the decision as to the necessity which would justify him in deliberately taking another's life to save his own. In this case, the weakest, the youngest, the most unresisting was chosen. Was it more necessary to kill him than one of the grown men? The answer must be no. It is therefore our duty to declare that the prisoner's act in this case was willful murder.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank my lovely students, Paul, Nathan and Natalie, for that performance. And I think we can thank you very much. And back over to interpretations.
I would like to thank Barry and his students for organising such a live event, so you can really see the potential of having the mock court next to us. This was fed directly into the console of the interpreters, who were then able to interpret. Well, were they able to interpret? Shall we ask them? So, interpreters, can you please tell us what you struggled with? So, fill your cards and they will now come up on the screen. Okay, so we can see the first few words arriving on the screen. A remit. So RV, what does RV stands? Acronyms. So that seems to be a challenge for the interpreters. Not unreasonable. Okay, so somebody says they found this incredibly challenging. Warranty. I'm obliged, as you can see. So justify as well. Okay. So to justify is an easy word, as you said, but what does it mean? Likely and probable. Okay, anything else, interpreters? Okay, so I've got one on this side coming up here. As to the necessity, morally repugnant? Is that the way you pronounce it? Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. Terms of address, so we can see that vocabulary is definitely something that has given our interpreters a headache, multiple clauses. But it's funny, as if we look at these words individually, they do not seem to be that difficult. Okay, so difficult and unknown register. So we can see here there's quite a jargon that you cannot invent. It cannot be improvised. It definitely is coded and it has to be learned. Somebody mentioned speed. Yes, that was fairly fast. And if you don't know something, there's no time to think. So you can see that the interpreters have had quite a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges on their hands. And this shows us the potential for training legal interpreters so that they are not improvised legal interpreters, but they are fully trained as legal interpreters. So I'd like to thank the interpreters for their contribution. I'd like to thank Barry and his students. And now I'm going to give the floor to Mike Orloff, the Executive Director of the National Register for Public Service Interpreting. But let me move this screen away so that I can have your profile here. You do have a PowerPoint presentation.
I was going to say, in the interest of time,
yes,
let me extemporise for 2 minutes rather than plough through a 10-minute presentation to
okay.
save us some time.
So would you like the PowerPoint presentation?
No
need.
No
okay,
need.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am so honoured to be here on such a special and auspicious day. And indeed, you'll excuse me, I am conscious of time. I know that we're running a little late, so rather than plough through, I think it was 43 slides in 10 minutes, we'll extemporise, actually 17, we'll extemporise for just 2 or 3 minutes. Dr. Michalina reminded us about change, about times can be hard, and we should prepare people for that. And this environment is all about that. It's all about preparing people for change and being part of change in an interpreting element, be it in conferences, be it in the public services. Danielle gave us a really good picture of change when she introduced us to all the building work that went on to create this amazing facility and the link with the mock courtroom, which is very important to us at the National Register for Public Service Interpreters. And why is that? Because the world of public service interpreting in the United Kingdom, as we have just seen with our mock court, it is absolutely vital that we have accredited, registered, very well trained, very well qualified and experienced individuals handling interpreting in public services, be it in the courtroom, be it in a custody suite in a police station, or indeed be it with a doctor in a consulting room. If the interpreter gets it wrong, then the public will suffer. Not only the public, if it is an ersatz interpreter, if it is a pseudo-interpreter, if it is a bilingual with no training, then the public purse will also suffer, as we've been told already today. Pay peanuts, get monkeys, and ensure that we actually are paying for the right service. I was with the Ministry of Justice only last week, and they said very clearly that our system isn't working particularly well. We're paying for it, and it needs to be changed. So when it comes to change, when it comes to public service interpreting in the UK, we have some deep issues, some fissures that need to be sorted. We cannot allow cases like the Tran case that we had last week, where a Vietnamese interpreter was falsifying birth certificates and has been found to be falsifying birth certificates. And who knows the chaos that's been caused by that. This individual was taken off the National Register back in 2017, and yet private agencies have been allowed to put this person into court, putting the public at risk, young children. So it is vital that the work of the National Register continues. It is vital that the work of the National Register continues about setting standards for not just interpreters, but lobbies for the standards in the private agencies, lobbies for standards with the practitioners in the public services as well as their procurement, and takes it all the way to government. Although I must tell you, our lobbying of government right now is very difficult. There's a lot of noise. I will leave it there, but just to say that the National Register of Public Service Interpreters will also be launching a translation register at the end of this year. And it's about time we had some development after 25 years of operating as the only voluntary organisation to register and to accredit and to regulate public services public service interpreters in the UK.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'd rather you didn't use a PowerPoint presentation. That was excellent. Thank you. You gave us an outstanding view, overview of the situation. So this concludes our section on when interpreters meet lawyers and the connection between the two domains. We are now moving on to a part which I feel very strongly about, and that is collaborating in a digital age. Believe me, there has been a lot of collaboration to make these facilities happen. And I'm really delighted that in this particular section, we're going to hear about the three strong stakeholders that have put this interpreting suite together. There is obviously Reflex, Reflex Limited, is the AV company that has put all this wonderful software that you see on the screen. There is BUK Solutions here. Andrew is representing the company there. So that's all about the equipment that the interpreters are using. And obviously, there is a university, and the university is going to be represented by Oliver, who's sitting over there, and who will tell us all about, the technology and the wonderful collaboration. So I think, to me, what matters the most is how the three different organizations work together to create something unique. So I'm now going to give the floor to Jaak de Pala, who is going to speak a little bit more about Reflex, and I think he's going to speak with his colleague, Sam.
Merci. Bon après-midi. Namaste, as they would say in India. Thank you very much. We're quite privileged from Reflex, really, because we've worked with the university now for a number of years on some innovative projects around the building, namely the Super Lab project, the Roding building, and now, of course, the Michalina Ageros interpreting suite and the mock courtroom. I've personally been in this industry now for nearly 20 odd years, and we do a lot of work within the higher education sector with a number of universities, high-profile universities across London and throughout the UK. But one thing that really stands out from LMU for me really is the way that they the tenacity towards embracing technology and collaboration, and we've been quite fortunate to be part of that journey with the university here, and we're really honoured to be part of the extended team to the university. So I just want to thank Danielle for getting us engaged in this project, to Ollie, to Mark, and really look forward to the next phase of innovation. That's it from me, to be honest. I'm just doing a very quick introduction. The main part of Reflex involvement in this project was carried out by Sam Barter, to my right. Sam was the project manager for this project, who got involved at a very early stage in this project in the design, worked with the university throughout the implementation of the project. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Sam to sort of talk you through some of the features and the benefits of the technology that you see here today, and some of the challenges that we had along the way as well. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Jaak. As Jaak says, I'm Sam, Reflex project manager for the AV installation. Now, as an English-speaking person, I'm going to give this a go, so bear with me. We have ni hao, bonjour, ciao, konnichiwa, sheise, hola, and hello. I got the last one. Firstly, we needed to understand all the different configurations that Danielle had been running at the interpretation suite at Moorgate. We visited many times to discuss the system, so we could then design and integrate her requirements into the new system for day-to-day use with minimal effort for users. We discovered that Danielle had really been stretching the boundaries of her existing equipment, adding and removing equipment as required for different types of classes and sessions. Danielle was actually very technical and rather impressed us with her knowledge of the system. Once all configurations were understood, we then went away, went through different design drafts and options, which was discussed with Mark, Ollie, John, and George in ITS. When all parties were happy that we had the correct option for the university, this was run through with Danielle to make sure all bases were covered. We then spent many weeks creating drawings of the system, making sure the integration of the Braille system was as seamless as possible. During this design phase, many hurdles were identified and overcome to make sure that when we came to install the system, it would be as painless as possible. Analog mixing desks were removed in favour of Dante digital audio with touch panel and iPad control, for instance. Another example of this, the original design had one central camera on the table. We discovered that this would give a blind spot around the table, and it would be too slow to do a full 360 turn, and it would miss the delegate speaking. So a decision was made to install 2 cameras back to back to give full 360-degree coverage and smooth, timely switching. Being such a technically complicated space, there was a lot to work through. We had many meetings with the contractors, T&B, for physical design of the room to ensure everything would physically fit. Thank you to Luke and Alex from T&B and Billy from Faithful and Gould for working with us and listening to our requirements and recommendations. Sight lines were checked and adjusted to make sure all areas of the room were covered. We've got 3 86-inch Avacor displays on motorised mounts to give fantastic viewing angles, as I'm sure you all agree. The main delegates table caused a few headaches. Setting out to keep 24 positions was a real challenge. I believe the table changed shape and size about 3 times to make sure that everyone could fit. The small cameras in the interpretation booths were also a challenge. We needed to find a camera with a wide enough field of view whilst giving compatible HDMI output. The small round axis cameras we've installed are a fantastic result for this and work very well within the booths. The monitor arms suitable for mountings of these cameras and the dual displays to give the right look and feel for the space without breaking the budget were a struggle also. We carried out monitor arm shootouts to trial different options before committing to make sure we had the right solution for each booth. As the system relies heavily on IP and network connectivity, we worked closely with the LMU Networks team to make sure the new equipment was integrated with the university network, and a big thank you to Jazz and his team. We supplied many detailed drawings of the space and wiring schematics for a seamless install, as you can see on the slides currently. They're flipping through all the drawings we put together. So we've got video distribution, which is achieved over AV over IP using Wirestorm NHD 400 transmitters and receivers. This offers the ability to cost-effectively send any source to any endpoint. Wirestorm also gives the ability to take a stream from other areas, such as the mock courtroom, as we've seen, and eject into the interpreting system. We have HD video from all the cameras and sources to all the displays for crystal clear video. Audio routing is via Dante and gives lots of flexibility. In conjunction with the Braille system, this brings the 2 systems together brilliantly. We have an Extron control system with a custom touch panel designed by Reflex. This gives users the ability to control an incredibly complicated system behind the scenes, making it instantly usable and intuitive for day-to-day operation. We have automatic video mixing from the Braille system, which removes the need for a dedicated technician to mix and adjust the camera views. The new system brings all Danielle's Moorgate additions and workarounds into a fixed, permanent solution. No need for cameras on tripods, little ad hoc mixing desks and things. Everything's in place and ready to be used for all possible configurations. We also have full multi-channel recording for review of technique and accuracy under exam conditions. We also have video conferencing capabilities with the auto mix being sent to the far end. As we've mentioned before, we have video streaming directly to YouTube, and we are streaming right now, can confirm. The large format displays are also touchscreens. The integration gives users access to Neuriva Span and note software, which you saw with the booth sending their notes in. Ultimately, this project was installed, commissioned in a timely manner and in on budget, and Reflex is proud to be part of this fantastic facility and look forward to the system being used day in, day out. I'm going to try this one more time. Shinsie? Sheshe. Merci, grazie, arigato, dziękuję, gracias, and thank you.
I would like to thank you, Sam. I think that you've been an inspiration, always calm, a smile, no matter what problems we had. It was just fantastic. I would also like to add that maybe some of you don't know that, but I teach with a wheelchair, and Reflex has done absolutely everything to accommodate my needs. So I do have an iPad with the same system as on the desktop, and I can operate everything from my wheelchair. I'd like also to thank David McGee, who is next in the room next door, head of estate, for making all this facility Ouija-friendly for me and very accessible. So it's going to be, again, a new experience for me compared to Moorgate. So thank you very much. Really appreciated your help during this new venture. I'm now going to move on to give the floor to BUK Solutions. And Andrew, you're going to represent Simon, who is not feeling very well today. So that's wonderful. I'm going to move to the screen, but you can start speaking.
Okay. After 30 years trading as Brailler ICS UK Limited, we rebranded as BUK Solutions. We believe this reflects more about our business today and the important high-profile clients like the London Metropolitan University in providing high-quality interpretation conference solutions. Our equipment support and system design offer the ideal solution for a diversity of sectors with hire and purchase options available. Clients also come to us for consultancy and complementary services, including interpretation and translation.
Sorry,
The slide's not up there yet.
Okay. It will be ready in a minute, and I'm sorry for you. Carry on.
Skip through. Yeah. In this digital age, it's important to recognise our strengths as companies. The LMU Interpretation Suite is a prime example where we have the coming together of AV experts in Reflex and interpretation experts in BUK Solutions. In this digital age, bringing together different technology seamlessly is key. So fully understanding the user requirements are crucial in terms of operation and functionality. Thank you, Danielle. So, for example, in this laboratory, we have fully integrated audio-visual systems and Brailler language interpretation and integrated camera control, all working together. The importance of good project management, thanks Sam, backed up by good working practices, was paramount to bring us all together along with the full cooperation and support of the LMU IT group. Here we can see some examples of the equipment that's in use in the lab. The following two Extron screenshots show how many controls, routing and recording options are available to the tutor to provide students with a complete interpretation learning experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Ollie, I'm going to give the floor and put your screen on in a bit.
Thank you, Danielle. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to be speaking today. My name is Ollie Holmes. I'm the IT Director here at London Met, so I'm responsible for all the central IT and AV in the university. I talk a lot, so I'm paying very close attention to the numbers there, and I might follow your lead a little bit and not talk too much about my slides, as colleagues have kind of talked about those a little bit already. But I'm also very underqualified, I think, for the room. I am a linguist, technically, having studied a bachelor's at UCL in linguistics. However, I definitely outshined here. So, collaborating in a digital age, this was a really interesting project for us because, as Sam has already kind of spoken about, and as Danielle showed in her initial slides, Moorgate was quite an interesting space for us in terms of an interpreting suite. Danielle used it to great advantage, but it needed something. I think you saw those wires, the snakes of cables everywhere, and I was a little concerned that she was showing those. As a central IT and AV provider for the university, it's part of my responsibility to make sure that I can help excellent academics like Danielle and the rest of her school deliver quality education and actually provide you guys, industry and the professional services with high quality graduates. So all those students sat in the booths around there, they're going to get awesome jobs and be part of your professional organisations. I have no doubt at all. But Moorgate probably wasn't the right place to start, although some of the people that are doing a great job out there did. I think that Danielle made a lot with, quite an interesting space. It was in a basement, which, made it feel a bit dark. Great for interpreting, maybe, but you did know that you were going to the basement, and it often flooded. So coming up a few floors, I think, has been quite helpful. But there's been organic growth, and I think that that's testament really to Danielle and looking at the technology changes. We've heard a bit about technology shifts, although I wish I'd met Michalina before, because we might have got away with a blackboard in here and just some, thick, heavy winter coats. But Danielle added video conferencing to the room and started remote interpreting, and also really pushed out web streaming. So it embraced a much wider audience than just her classroom, and brought people from, and continues to bring people from all over the world into her classroom. And it's really fantastic to see. And that's something that we really wanted to get into this space. So what we needed to do, and Sam's talked a bit about the technology, how we came up with some of those designs and how we worked out what we needed was a bit of reverse engineering, but actually talking to Danielle about her different use cases. So how she teaches, what she needs to teach, and actually how she tests and examines, because we found there was quite a lot of manual intervention, which if you think about moving from booth to booth to booth to booth to booth, to press record, and then to walk back round booth, to stop it afterwards, we realised that that wasn't really what was going to go on here. So we had to work out what we were going to do there. And that involved, Sam showed some nice pretty pictures, and they are very pretty pictures, but there were lots of designs. If you kept the version numbers on there, Sam, they would be in double digits. Okay, so that's quite a lot of work, but it was great. And of course, we really had to take advantage of the industry standards and make sure that we were designing a space that was right for graduates to go out into the world of work, and it would be familiar with them. So it needed to be a professional conferencing and interpreting space, but actually we're about learning and teaching here. So we had to fuse the two together and make sure that we had the right learning and teaching technology, so the right lecture recording equipment, the right ability to be able to share to different rooms, and to make sure that what happens in the classroom can be maintained and shared with other people as well. So we ended up with a clicker that doesn't move forward. There we go. I called it Interpreting Suite 2.0. I don't think that actually that acknowledges that transition that you talked about, Michalina, from the beginning. So maybe it's a bit further than that. But this is where we are now. Everything is digital in the space. We have no analog technology. Even the audio, which is traditionally quite an analog thing to get latency in to make sure you have that quality, is over digital, and this gives us loads of capability. Everything can go everywhere. All inputs and can go to all outputs, and vice versa, which is lovely. And it means that these screens that you see can be used to best effect. The booths can talk to each other, can be used independently. It really is quite impressive. And Danielle touched on the accessibility. Accessibility was really important to us, for Danielle, but also for the students that we have at the university. It's only right and appropriate that this space can be used by all and used to its maximum. There aren't compromises. So lastly, I want to just thank the partnerships with Reflex. We have worked with Reflex for many years, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And we've worked with Braille BUK now on the first iteration of the interpreting suite, and actually moving stuff up here. But really, and I didn't put them on the slide, I really wanted to thank my staff. So Mark, John, we've got James over here, loads of my staff who have been really involved in creating this, in making sure we've got training materials, things work. There have been lots of late nights. Sam, I think sometimes you've slept here. You've certainly been here when I've left, and that's been relatively late, and been here when I come in, which is not quite as early as Mark. So, there has been a lot of hard work, but I think it's paid off. I'm really, really rewarded by seeing all of you around the table, and actually even more so, the reaction from students when they walk into this space. That's who it's for, and that's me ending.
I think that I would like to thank all the teams for being so patient, because I was quite demanding at times, but you were always there to listen patiently and then revisit continuously until we got what we wanted. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to give the floor to Eva, who is going to continue chairing this session until the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. We are moving to our next session, next theme, which is From Interpreting Students to Professionals, a Community of Practice. And it is my pleasure to give the floor to Bayan Abugaida, who is our London Met Conference Interpreting alumna. Bayan, over to you.
Thank you and good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be sitting here representing a sample of former postgraduates from this amazing Masters in Conference Interpreting. I was an interpreter and translator prior to attending this course. However, I felt that my options as an interpreter were very limited and not rewarding enough. So I looked for universities in London and that provided conference interpreting with Arabic, and emailed this wonderful lady named Danielle, who replied with an invitation to the aptitude test. I'm reminded to slow down for the interpreters. Within 1 month, I was enrolled in the Masters in Conference Interpreting. It was a very busy year with studying, interpreting practice, and practice. As postgrads, we were very lucky to go and have a taste in conference interpreting at the Court of Justice of the European Union in Luxembourg, where we listened to the interpreting, met with the interpreters, and who shared their experiences with us. We also had the pleasure of visiting the United Nations in Geneva, where we practiced interpreting in a dummy booth for a week. We were blessed with wonderful UN interpreters who listened and commented on our interpreting. They gave us invaluable advice. We learned for each assignment or mock conference to do extensive research and gather information related to the topics, the speakers, possible historic references, current affairs related, and so on. We built glossaries and shared them. We learned to work in teams and apply booth etiquette. We also learned how to market ourselves, value our work, and respect this interpreting profession. While at the aptitude test, we were asked to present a topic prepared in 5 minutes and delivered in front of an audience. This is something we continued practicing during the year. I later understood why this was important. We learned to think on our feet, to speak in front of an audience, and deliver an audible and meaningful consecutive interpretation that is accurate and faithful to the speaker. A German study mentioned that conference interpreters were when working, had stress levels similar to Air Force pilots in the air, so preparation was essential. We had many exercises on split attention, improving our memory, on dealing with different accents, and in being prepared in general. So I graduated with a distinction and started to pursue work. It was somewhat difficult to set one's foot in this field. However, with time, I started to get some clients. But as time went by, my personal interpreting practice was affected by the daily work I had to carry out as a public service interpreter. It was thanks to the ambassador scheme that pulled me back to the training again. During the ambassador scheme for interpreting studies, I worked with an Arabic conference interpreter student. We supported each other with our practice. It was a successful collaboration of mutual benefit. For we were sharing comments and suggestions, working as a team in the booth, and preparing Arabic speeches for practice in our mock conference. During that period, I also attended an advanced conference interpreting to prepare the EU-UN accreditation test. Even though we had already approached EU-UN matters during the master's degree, this was expanded and we had plenty of practice related to different topics for these two international organizations and others such as UNESCO. I confess that without the help of amazing teachers during that period, including Michelle or Michalina Ageros, I would not have learned much by just depending on myself. My dream of interpreting at the UN was realized this year when I was asked to interpret for clients in one of the booths at the UN in Geneva. I couldn't believe it. I was actually interpreting there in a booth and received good praise afterwards by my clients. I also interpreted in Brussels at an EU headquarters and in embassies. I used my learned presentation skills in my consecutive interpreting for these clients during roundtable meetings. With the help of combined experience from my master's degree and the training of the advanced course, my confidence to take such jobs was possible. Finally, in conclusion, I have recently attended the Trainers for Interpreting Studies course. It was intensive, very educational and practical. I'm also happy to say that I have been appointed as an associate lecturer at London Metropolitan University last year. Thank you, Danielle. You have been our rock throughout. And thank you all the rest of our wonderful teachers, Natalie, Alex, Anton, Max, Roberto, and my tutor, Maha, who all helped in preparing the tools and shaping our paths as professional conference interpreters. Your comments and advice will always be in our minds when interpreting. And greetings to all my colleague interpreters. Thank you. Shukran.
Thank you, Bayan. Without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Alice Spendley, Hanover London Met Conference Interpreting Alumna.
Thank you very much, Bayan. Thank you, Eva. I'm a bit poorly, so I hope that doesn't come across, but I just had to be here. So I'm also a bit of a one for talking fast. So sorry, everybody. So, dear colleagues, distinguished guests and friends, it's inspiring sitting here in the wonderful Michalina Ageros interpreting suite with you all. Everyone here is an important part of our interpreting community. Community is a thread that I feel is deeply woven into the fabric of interpreting here at London Met. Whether that's assisting each other as professionals in the booths, providing feedback from practice, Michelle, or simply being there with a cup of tea in hand when a stressful assignment is coming up, and that's probably happened to everybody here. The sense of community and mutual support is what drew me to interpreting at London Met. Now that it's been over a year since I graduated from the MA in conference interpreting, being here today has caused me to reflect on the journey that I've come on. Interpreting seemed to fit me perfectly. As a person who's deeply interested in the world, loves languages, and most importantly loves talking, the idea that this was a career that I could have was exciting. At times, as a student, when things got tough, I'd worry that I wasn't practicing enough, or improving quickly enough, or that I would never be able to nail that pesky German grammar perfectly. But all through it, I and my fellow classmates have had the support of dedicated professional interpreters and a community of practice. You've probably guessed that I love words. I love finding out about weird and wonderful etymologies or obscure grammar points, hence the German. And so one of the challenges as a student for me was moving away from the words and towards the ideas that we always talk about. And luckily, I had my fantastic tutor, Roberto, there to remind me that it wasn't always about the words. And I don't know if he's here today, but if he is, thanks, Roberto. Now, as a professional, I've been fortunate enough to work on 3 separate occasions with London Met Conference interpreting graduates. And this is a bit of ad-lib here, but whenever I work with those, I always feel this sense of community. I know that we'll get on, even if we've never met before, and I'm a little less worried about stepping into the booth, although still pretty nervous. Last year, I took part in the Ambassador Scheme with Bayan, and the scheme offers recent graduates the opportunity to practice with and mentor current students, because we can learn a lot from them as well. And in return, we're able to use the interpreting suite, and now this new flash one as well, for our own practice. Ambassadors are also able to attend the Advanced Conference Interpreting course, and this course provided us with a fantastic opportunity to bridge the gap between student and professional. Sometimes it takes a while to get your first paid assignment, and I know that for sure. And having a regular practice allows you to be really poised to take those assignments that come up and know you'll be ready to hit the ground running. I think mentoring programs like the Ambassador Scheme here at London Met are integral to supporting newly graduated interpreters in taking the first steps in their careers. Interpreting professionally is not something you can ease into, is it? You can't just turn up and have a go, or ask the speaker to pause whilst you look up something. There's no induction period where you can bow out if it's too difficult. This is why communities of practice and spaces like this suite are so important. Communities of practice aren't just important for newly qualified interpreters. The world today, as Michelle said, technology, business, everything seems to change at lightning speed. Continuing professional development is a cornerstone for best practice, and communities of practice really help to enable this. I hope, as everyone here does, that the Michalina Ageros Interpreting Suite will continue to be a hub for both seasoned and fledgling interpreters, practicing and developing their skills together. Excuse me. Michelle has shared so much with us, always graciously, delivering blistering 3-minute speeches for memory practice. I look upon those fondly, and providing insightful and incisive feedback, amongst other things. In a tough job market, it's so important that interpreters continue to work together to uphold the integrity of the profession, add value for clients, and be the very best we can be. And so, thank you to all of you and everyone who's not here today who gives their time, energy, and ideas to the interpreting profession. And thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Alice. Thank you, Bayan, for your contributions. It was a real pleasure to learn about all the progress you both made in your interpreting careers. We're really proud of you. And I know from experience what a challenge it is to actually bridge that gap between graduating, finding your first paid assignments, as you mentioned, and then becoming a fully fledged conference interpreter. And we have all heard about the ambassador schemes, about the advanced interpreting practice organized by London Met. And now you know what value it brings to bridge that gap. And we have now decided to extend that community of practice. And in addition to those programs that I just mentioned, we are launching the London Interpreters Practice Group, LIPG. And I would like to share with you the reasons why we decided to set this group up. It is to enable fledgling interpreters, as well as already experienced ones, to practice simultaneous and consecutive skills. This will be achieved through both interpreting practice and peer feedback. We are aware that various groups of interpreters successfully practice in Brussels, in Paris, and in other cities, and we were inspired by them. That's why we decided to put London on the map. In this context, I would like to thank Federica Mamini for all her insights and support. And you may wonder how we are going to run this group. In the light of our colleagues' suggestions, the sessions will run once a month on a Monday evening. And the first practice will actually take place on Monday, 4th of November 2019. The group will be run by volunteers and will be open to anyone who is committed, interested, and qualified. Further details and information will be circulated later via emails and social media. However, if you're watching us online and you are interested in joining our group, please feel free to contact us by email on londonintpractice@gmail.com. Let us not forget that in the booth today, we've got our recent students and recent graduates and actually current students working and interpreting into 6 languages. I think it's a good time to say thank you to all of you for the valuable work you're doing today. Lastly, I feel honored to participate in the inauguration of the Michalina Ageros Interpreting Suite. And I would like to take this opportunity to say a few words in my mother tongue to one of the most inspirational people I have ever met. Pani Michalino, nie ma słów, które mogłyby wyrazić moją wdzięczność. Bardzo Pani dziękuję za bycie moim nauczycielem, mentorem, za poświęcony czas i zaangażowanie w mój rozwój zarówno osobisty, jak i zawodowy. Życzę sobie, by Pani była z nami jak najdłużej i dalej inspirowała kolejne pokolenia tłumaczy. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, so this will conclude our session on the theme Interpreting Students to Professionals, and we are moving to our last but not least theme, which is very important for us. It's the partnership with employers. And we are going to start with Antonio Paoletti, who is the head of the Meeting Services and Interpretation section at the International Maritime Organization. Antonio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Eva. I love the last few seconds of your presentation, there's a little bit of crackling coming from your microphone, and your face, Sam, was priceless. I would have put your MasterCard out, because in classic technician style, oh my God, what is going on? Anyway, on with my presentation, which hopefully won't be too boring. If you do feel like falling asleep, please go ahead and feel free. I will not hold it against you. Antonio Paletti, Head of Meeting Service Interpretation Section, which is a glorified way of saying I'm responsible for organizing and managing conferences for the IMO and recruiting interpreters and other language professionals. We are the specialized agency of the United Nations, and I should be able to work this out. I've been doing it for 25 years. Specialized agency of the United Nations responsible for safety of shipping, maritime transport, prevention of pollution of the marine environment, which is a massive, massive issue. Shipping does matter. It is a very significant sector of the economy. If I would ask anybody to guess, you walk into a shop, into a supermarket, or into any shopping center, and give a guess of what percentage of the goods you see on the shelves have been moved by seaborne trade. Anyone whatsoever, what guess? 90%. Gentlemen, here on my right, weighing straight off. Have you been practicing at the IMO in the dummy booth? I'm sure you have. 90% and over of goods you find in shops have been transported by sea. So it's 1.something million seafarers, and we owe them a great deal of gratitude. IMO is currently 174 member states, and we also work with a plethora of other IGOs and NGOs who work in the maritime sector. Simultaneous interpretation at the IMO meetings is provided to the 6 official languages. So as far as an employer is concerned, we are volume-wise, we're a fairly significant employer. We provide language services in Arabic, Chinese, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. We are recruiting a team of 15, 20 interpreters per conference, times 25, 30 conference weeks per year. So we quite, the turnover is quite high. We're also pleased to be able to work with different universities. We provide opportunities for students to come to IMO and practice in the dummy booth. I was very pleased today. I already met about 3 or 4 now professionally working interpreters who actually said, oh yes, I did attend dummy booth at the IMO and I found it very useful. It made my day. Thank you very much. Where are we? I'm sure there is something there. Now, IMO, as my friend Monica knows only too well, is a signatory of the UNCB Agreement on Conditions of Employment of Short-Term Conference Interpreters. The agreement goes back to 1969, when it was first stipulated between the UN and AIC. The first agreement took about 2 years to be drafted and approved by all parties concerned. 2019, so the 50th anniversary of the agreement and the renewal of the AIC agreement. And in 2019, it took two years and a bit to finalize the agreement again. So it was a bit, certain things don't change. Our interpreters are all freelancers. We do not have in-house interpreters. They are recruited on daily contracts. We are subject to the terms and conditions of the UN AIC agreement. Interpreters work 2 assignments of 3 hours each per day, and then a number of assignments over the week, and all the other conditions that are involved in the agreement. Workload, the number of interpreters are obliged to have able to provide relay in the 2 pivot languages of any conference, etc., etc. It also regulates the recruitment of Group 1 and Group 2 interpreters. And regrettably, IMO is very difficult for us to be able to recruit Group 2 interpreters, i.e. beginners. The subject of our conference is highly technical, it's very specific, so you put a young up-and-coming interpreter under so much pressure, then we are scared of putting them off interpreting for the rest of their lives, and we don't want that. Brief history of interpretation has been touched upon before. Historic landmark of the profession was the Nuremberg trials. Until very late, and our friends had touched upon that, interpretation was done consecutively. The speaker speaks, then the interpreter just gives it. The trials were the groundbreaker, and it was thanks to an intuition of a French gentleman called Leon Dostema. I'm sure I'm preaching to converted here. Then he understood that the human brain was capable of doing two things at once, listening and speaking. I believe that police officers also do share some of the training that interpreters do, because they have to be able to talk to one person and listen to the radio and follow the conversation on the radio at the same time. Working conditions of interpreters. Those of you who have been to the IMO know that we have 3 large rooms, large conference rooms with permanently fitted interpretation suites for up to 8 different languages, although we use 6, but it's always nice to have 2 spare ones, just in case anything goes wrong with equipment. Am I crackling again there? So I can see the technical staff looking very concerned. Thank you. It's a very difficult profession. We do understand, I'm not an interpreter myself, but we do understand the pressure the new guys, and I'm talking to the ones behind the glass partitions there, find yourselves under. When you have to, in a split second, you've got to find the right word to interpret, to translate what the delegates are saying down on the floor. There was a fantastic example earlier on from my mother tongue's booth when I think Santi was translated as a branchia academica, and I saw some giggling in the interpretation booth of the Italian thing. But I like to see your colleague just saying, just go with the flow, carry on, do not stop. When you step into the booth on the first day of your assignment, I refer to that as the tip of the iceberg. It is hard work, you're under pressure, but most of the work is done before you get into that booth. The preparation for one of our meetings is absolutely crucial to the good delivery of your services. You can't have one without the other. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Also remember, once again, that IMO, together with the ICAO in Canada, is probably the most technical and most specific of the UN agencies. So it is very, very difficult to familiarize yourself with a world which is constantly developing and moving forward, and with the myriad of issues that go from the naval architecture, the design of a cruise liner that takes 10,000 people around the world, to marine biology and to chemistry of marine pollution. In order to facilitate the entry point for interpreters at the IMO, we have created a database of references and terminologies. And if I have to recruit an interpreter who's never worked for the IMO before, what we tend to do is to give that interpreter a lead time of about 6 months, accessing our terminology and references database, and then offer them the first engagement with the IMO. Challenges interpreters may face, and there are many. Interpreters work in a multilingual, multicultural environment. We all know that. Mutual understanding is essential. Again, talking about the UN, we are talking about 174 administrations coming together and trying to come up with the goods, with a solution. A lack of understanding can lead to all sorts of problems because it can snowball into a massive, massive problem. Probably some of us will probably know that, just to give an example, Nikita Khrushchev at the high point of the Cold War was interpreted when talking about the United States, and the interpreter said, Nikita Khrushchev said, "We will bury you." What Khrushchev meant, we will outlast you, the USSR will outlast the USA. That could have caused a few problems in those days, and that was my attempt to some sort of special effects. More challenges for interpreters. Again, we go to US President Jimmy Carter. He was speaking to a Polish-speaking audience. There is something, a certain Polish theme about this. And he said, "I left the United States this morning." The interpreter said, "When I abandoned the United States, never to return." So that caused a few giggles. Later on, it got even more complicated because he said that, "I've come to learn your opinions and understand your desires for the future." And it was interpreted saying, "I desire the poor carnally and want to grasp their intimate parts." And this is all true. I've Googled this, so if it's on Google, it's got to be true. But apart from that, a mistake in interpretation can lead to very serious consequences. And I found another example. In 1980, a young man was admitted to hospital The interpreter mixed up the two words and he translated the Spanish word intoxicado, which means suffering from some sort of poisoned or something serious, into the English word intoxicated, which is what happens if you stay too many hours in a pub on a Friday night. And unfortunately, because that's that very basic mistake, this young man was left quadriplegic. He was not treated for the problem he had, and he was left in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. I have interpreted words into another language. How difficult can it be? Don't forget, then, in the context of the UN, you have, like right now, you have a person using a language which is not his own or her own mother tongue. So that makes it even more difficult. Over the years, I collected a few samples of what has been going on in our conference rooms, and I just used them as challenges for the interpreters, qualified and up-and-coming interpreters. The first one, it's we were running an election of a chair for one of our meetings, and this person said, "We admire the chairwoman for her capacity to assume very difficult and painful positions and retain them for a long time. Still to this day, I had no idea whether they're talking about an IMO convention or an ancient Japanese love-making text." This is one from one of my colleagues in the Secretariat. "The only option we have at our disposal, amongst all the other avenues perfectly open to us." And the last one is it's one that I'm going to leave for the drinks afterwards, and I want some interpreters to come and tell me what this person meant with the last sentence. "This lady is not an easy person to get on with, especially when through someone else's lips." I'll see you later over the Prosecco. There is no hiding in your chosen profession. You can't pretend. Is the video...
I didn't know it was video.
It's not playing. It's supposed to be... Sorry. This has been a conference manager. It's great to be on this side of the fence and just put someone else under pressure.
Which one is a video? I didn't know.
It got 2 bits of video. That's no, before that. Before? That one, yeah.
No, it's not a video.
Well, it was on my presentation. Anyway, it's about, some of you may have seen it. It was about the one before was about the sign language interpreter, which is employed by the government of the Republic of South Africa at Nelson Mandela's funeral. What made me laugh about that person is that as an attenuating circumstances, when he gave an interview to a South African television channel, he said that he was having a really bad day because on that day he could hear voices. Now, being an interpreter, I would call that a day where A, your technicians have done their job properly, and B, there is a daily salary coming into your bank. But never mind that. Unfortunately, it wasn't. And he also said he used to suffer at the time from schizophrenia, and he was placed next to Barack Obama and other leaders. Never mind. If he does come back, we'll play the video afterwards. So finally, and in conclusion, many languages spoken can cause confusion. I found this quote, which is really, really interesting. Interpreting is not just a technique, it's an art. And remember, please, please, please switch off your microphone when you are in the booth. And hopefully check the red light, and hopefully this bit will work. Just click on the image.
It's a picture. It's not a link.
I'm sorry. That was the best bit, my entertainment bit. This is again. It's something that happened in New York at the Security Council. The other left. Anyway, it was a meeting of the UN Security Council, and it was about a number of resolutions against a particular member state in the Middle East. The interpreter in the English booth thought that she had the microphone on interpreting the chairman who was speaking in Spanish, and she didn't. Then she thought she had switched the microphone off, and she actually turned it on, and made some comments which were not very appropriate. So I'm afraid to say that person's career in the UN New York is probably come to an abrupt end. For the benefit of the Italian booth, I'm just going to switch to Italian for the last couple of minutes. Abbiamo parlato oggi del settore della professione, del settore dove gli interpreti professionisti cercheranno il lavoro. Una discussione interessante che è venuta fuori durante l'ultimo giro di negoziazioni con AIC è stata la differenza tra due scuole di pensiero. Come datore di lavoro di un interprete, chi cerco come interprete? Cerco, se ho una conferenza che si basa sulla sicurezza del disegno delle navi, cerco un architetto navale che poi si mette a fare l'interprete, oppure se si tratta della protezione dell'ambiente marino cerco un biologo marino o un chimico che poi è diventato interprete, o cerco un interprete che ha studiato e che ha avuto un tirocinio specifico per entrare in cabina ed interpretare simultaneamente, che però ha l'abilità di prepararsi su una miriade di materie, di soggetti e di argomenti che possono svariare dal marittimo all'aviazione al commissariato dei rifugiati dell'HCA, dove si parla di salvare la vita a migliaia di persone che non hanno alloggio. La mia opinione è che l'interprete deve essere, il training deve rendere capace di interpretare, non di essere un esperto di disegno di navi o di biologia marina, ma di interpretare da una lingua in altre 2 o 3 lingue. Questo secondo me è importante. Non si cerca la persona, l'architetto o il biologo, ma si cerca un interprete che è qualificato al livello più alto possibile. Con questo io vi auguro un forte in bocca al lupo e spero un giorno di avervi come interpreti a lavorare per l'IMO. So I thank you all very much for your attention. I'm honored and pleased to be here with you to share this important day, and thank you, Daniele, for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And now I would like to give the floor to our next speaker, Richard Littlewood, who is the Head of Translation and Interpreting at the Foreign Commonwealth Office. Richard, over to you.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting me to be part of the inauguration of these magnificent new interpretation facilities and the mock court. It's a privilege to be able to share this auspicious day with you all. The Foreign Office has had links with universities and other higher education institutions offering professional translation and interpreting training since long before I joined the office back in 1989. Back then, there was literally a handful of such institutions in the UK, and the Foreign Office's first such partnership was with the University of Bath, whose postgraduate translation and interpreting diploma course was set up in the 1960s by Professor James Coveney, a true pioneer in his field. The world has moved on since then, of course, and aspiring translators and interpreters now have a plethora of good quality translation and interpreting courses to choose from, both at undergraduate and postgraduate level. As a translator whose options were much more limited all those years ago, it's heartening for me to see the expansion of this sector and the sustained interest in the pursuit of careers in linguistic professions, which are vital to the work of governments and nations across the globe. Fostering and maintaining such links are not acts of charity on our part, of course, but operate just as much in our interests as in the interests of the academic establishments concerned. These are, after all, symbiotic relationships. Through communication and exchange with translation and interpreting departments, we, as an employer, gain an insight into the latest developments in the training of linguists who may well go on to work for us in future, either in-house or on a freelance basis. Such partnerships also enable us to share with those academic institutions what it is that we look for in and expect from our translators and interpreters, so that these requirements could be fed into and inform the training the academic establishments deliver to their students. A further important benefit of these partnerships, from our point of view, is their contribution to what is now called succession planning. In other words, making provision for the future retirement or departure of existing linguists. Superhuman, as we all know, translators and interpreters are, we do, as you can see, age, and we do eventually retire. As head of translation and as head of translation and interpreting at the Foreign Office, I need to know that when I look to replace in-house staff or external suppliers who are about to retire or move on to something else, there will be people out there with the qualifications and skills necessary to meet the needs of my customers and my customers' customers. It is courses such as those offered by London Met and its counterparts that ensure that such appropriately qualified and skilled linguists are available to us when we need them. And planning for future requirements is more of a priority now than perhaps ever before, certainly within the UK government. The process of the UK's departure from the European Union, Brexit, has already presented us with challenges that are either new or that we have not had to deal with for many years. To give but one example, the UK is currently embarked upon an ambitious programme of replicating a long list of agreements and treaties with third countries, that is to say, non-EU countries, to which it is at present a party as an EU member state. This process will convert those agreements and treaties from EU plus third country to UK plus third country instruments. From a linguistic point of view alone, this is an enormous task, not least because some of the texts run to hundreds of pages, and also brings with it extensive textual amendments requiring translation and lengthy negotiations requiring interpretation. And this is just the start. Whether the UK leaves the EU with or without a deal, it will have as one of its principal priorities in future the conclusion of trade and other agreements with countries around the world. The difference following Brexit will be that the UK will be negotiating these agreements alone, rather than as part of the EU. As such, it will no longer be able to rely on the extensive linguistic resources in Brussels and Luxembourg to which it has had access for the past 40 plus years. It will have to go it alone in more ways than one. We at the Foreign Office therefore anticipate a much enhanced need from our UK government customers for the services that we supply, and a diversification of those services as linguistic responsibilities which were once devolved from us to the EU come back to the UK, all of which will have an inevitable impact on the extent to which we rely not only on our in-house staff but on external translators and interpreters. Leaving Brexit aside for a moment, if I dare, let's not forget that the day-to-day business of government carries on, of course. The country still has to function and engage with its partners, and we in translation and interpreting at the Foreign Office have to be there to help it function. Meetings, summits, conferences, telephone calls, state visits, VIP visits, trade missions, and so on continue to take place, notwithstanding the ongoing certainty over the UK's future relationship with the European Union. And we continue to facilitate communication at these events through the services of our translators and interpreters. So, the demand for translation and interpreting within UK government cannot but grow in the years ahead. As a standalone player on the world stage in future, the UK will need to find a multilingual voice to be able to engage effectively with its international partners. And it will be looking to us as the only external-facing translation and interpreting service within Her Majesty's government to provide that voice. To a large extent, however, we are only a conduit, relying, as we do, on external suppliers to deliver many of the services that we offer. The UK's multilingual voice will therefore come sooner or later from the students here at London Met and from their counterparts in comparable institutions across the country and beyond. Michalina spoke at various points in her contribution about history and historical events, and I have one that I would like to pick up on here to close. In 1914, following the outbreak of the First World War, the then UK Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, was pictured in an army recruitment poster under the heading, "Britain's Lord Kitchener Wants You." In later posters, this became, "Your Country Needs You." Now, we're obviously not at war, despite the impression that recent exchanges in Parliament may have given, but we are about to embark on a momentous phase in the UK's history. And in that context, it seems appropriate for me to say to aspiring interpreters and translators and to our colleagues in the booths behind, the UK needs you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'm conscious of time, so I will go straight to our next presenters, and I would like to introduce to you Iris Chong, Claire Huang, and Vincent B. from Sinobridge International.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to join our community here. My name is Vincent. I'm a project manager from a company called Sinobridge, and I'm glad my two colleagues can join us today, and I'll be presenting on behalf of them. I think probably just some really feelings that I have to express now, which are so strong that sometimes you have this situation, it can only be expressed in your mother tongue. I think as multilinguals all know that. 今天非常感谢丹尼尔的盛情邀请。也非常荣幸今天能够代表英伦国际有限公司来祝贺伦敦都市大学的新的口译教室的落成典礼。我们非常的荣幸，因为我们和伦敦都市大学呢不仅有多年的合作，而且我们也之前在 Morgate 的时候，我们亲身参与了很多学生的教学，所以说能够看到我们的这个项目不断的发展壮大，能够进一步的升级，其实对于我们来讲也是非常荣幸的一件事情，可以说是与有幸焉。而且呢，我自己本身也是作为一个口译员出身，当然像跟Michalina女士相比的话，我是晚辈了。借用中国文章里面的一句古话，童子何知，躬逢胜剑。Okay, so much for the Mandarin part. I think what I'm trying to do today, and I'm very time conscious, is to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Sinobridge, and also what we do with London Met in terms of interpreting. Well, maybe a little bit introduction to our company is in order, because we have a very special practice. When we talk about interpreting, we think either it's freelance or in-house. People differ between that. Well, if we follow that paradigm, then we have an in-house interpreter team, but we are not a regular in-house team in that we don't support a business. So we don't have a business client. We are the business. So there's a slight difference there. So that's our company. We were established in 1998. Our parent company is actually in Beijing. We're designated by the Chinese regulator as the training facilitator and provider for Chinese governmental delegations and more public sector organizations, including state-owned enterprises, other public sector bodies, including health bodies, etc., as their training provider when they came over to the UK for training. So these training programs typically last for 2 or 3 weeks, and currently we're extremely busy. Now, as I mentioned, we're very busy, and that's because we have a huge influx of training groups each year. This year, we are expecting around 50, and we have already received 10 or something of them, and we're expecting more. They cover a wide range of different topics: finance, maritime industry. As mentioned, we have recently received delegation from the China State Shipbuilding Corporation. We also cover other areas like education, transport, anything the government is interested and the government covers, really. We'll try to meet with their needs, and especially with all these changes going on in China, they're trying to learn more. And when they explore new pathways in the future of new types of governance, they are in need of lessons to learn and also experience to refer to, hence their trips to the UK. As I mentioned, we have an interpreter team. We currently have 11 in-house interpreters, all graduates from different UK-based institutes and their interpreting programs. We tend to think this is actually our core market proposition, that we have a very strong interpreting team, we hold very high quality standards, and we can actually tell these training delegates what the speakers are talking about. And so they can really learn something, and they can reach value for money. As you can see, finance is one of their areas of interest as well. All right. Some of our business, as I mentioned, interpreting is part of a value-adding part of our service package. What we do is we provide a one-stop training program service for our client, including the training resources, interpreting services, and also logistic support. And for us, it's primarily consecutive interpreting. I am really honored that I can be connected here with Michalina there, that I still doing consecutive, the primarily of my time, 90%. That actually poses some great challenge to our interpreters, because they are not just interpreters. They have to be presentable. They have to be a very good public speaker. They have to somehow sense the vibe, the chemistry in the room, which is very important. We have very stringent quality standards. So when we recruit our interpreters, when we hold our interview, we actually require them, well, we don't tell them that, but we are looking for at least 90% of information retention. That's what we need from them. Because our client pays a lot of money to learn something from during their trip to the UK, and we have to make sure we deliver. And I think all our colleagues here can relate to that. Our clients actually want information from us, and it is our responsibility to actually give them that information with faithfulness. In order to ensure that we have our internal training and our quality control that disaggregates into a great lot of different parts. For example, we have our own terminology board to make sure our terminology is up to date, especially with new things and new concepts coming out every day in public governance. And we also encounter this issue, I think many Asian languages, especially Eastern Asian languages, may encounter that when you interpret from English to Chinese, for example, you cannot just follow the word order. It doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. Things like accountability or value for money or things like that, we just scratch our head every day, and I'm so glad I'm not bored yet, really. Sorry. And also we have our internal training in terms of recruiting interns every year, we have an annual paid internship program. We'd like to think A is to ensure our own quality standards, and B is also a contribution to the wider interpreting community so that they can actually, especially fellow students, when they freshly graduate from institutions, we all know how difficult it is to get your first assignment. We hope that this internship program can help them to make their first step and to climb up on the ladder, so to say. This internship runs typically from June to December, and I'm actually responsible for the internal training for them to make sure they can be up to our standard and to actually tell them that what is to be done to make sure they can improve in the future. So not only just what to do, but how to think what to do. I think that's even more important than just telling them to do things. We have a long history with the London Met, something our bosses told us. I think we started our engagement more than 10 years ago, if I were right, Daniel. At that time, our managing director, Dennis, actually personally visited London Met, and we talked about a lot of different plans, joint teaching, joint training, etc. And I'm pleased to say that that vision now has partially realized in that senior interpreters in our company actually now teach at London Met as tutors for the Chinese students, and we're glad to see we have been doing this for 3 years now, and we are planning to do that in the foreseeable future because it's a good opportunity for us as well, that we can know what the teaching world is going on, what is going on there. What's the new thinking and new paradigm in terms of interpreting services, and how we can learn from that and combine this practical experience and this academic thinking together. That is important for us, and that can actually refreshes our idea of internal training as well. We are also engaged in other activities. For example, the CPD program London Met has held. I gave a keynote speech a few years ago talking about quality in interpreting. And it's always good to have these discussions with our fellow interpreters. Now, I'm conscious of time, so just a little bit more of the future. We, as I said, we are committed to work with London Met in the future. We think this is a good opportunity for both parties, and as our interpreters accumulate their experience, I think we do have something to share, and we are more than happy to share with fellow students at London Met. And students at London Met are, of course, more than welcome to apply for our internship program. So I think we interviewed one student, I think, in 2017. And if more would like to come, they're more than welcome. And the basis of this ongoing cooperation, of course, I think is from our point of view, we are seeing more and more delegations every year coming to the UK from China. And that means we require more and more human power to put into it our qualified interpreters who can understand both worlds and actually deliver quality interpreting services. So we very much look forward to that. And I hope, Danielle, that we will meet you and meet your students in not so far future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I would like to move now to our next speaker, who is actually sitting on the right. And I would like to introduce you to Elaine Callahan, who is the interpreting manager for the RWS Language Solutions. Elaine, over to you.
Thank you, Ava. Yes, presentation, yeah. I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me today, and also for congratulations on such a fantastic facility. It's absolutely amazing. There's a photograph in my slides later on, and I'm thinking, oh dear, they're going to be really disappointed. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And just a short little bit about RWS, what we do. We're one of the largest language solutions companies in the world. In a minute. just a little bit of background. I'm an interpreting manager for RWS, so I look after all sorts of different assignments for interpreters, from a poorly toe right through to a big conference. So a wide range of experience in looking after various tournament assignments. So like I said, RWS is one of the largest and world-leading companies in the world for languages. We're divided into 4 divisions. So we've got RWS IP Services, which is all around intellectual property, patent filing, patent searches. RWS Moravia, which is a large translation, localization company, again with venues all over the world. RWS Life Sciences concentrates all on the life science side of things. So all the pharmaceutical and medical companies, and they work very closely with them. And then we've got RWS Language Solutions, who provide translation for technical various companies. But within the Language Solutions area, we have the interpreting team who provide interpreting services for the whole company. So not only do we deal with Language Solutions, we also deal with the IP service, Moravia and Life Sciences. So we cover the whole range of subjects and organise events for all of them. On the screen there's various different figures that have come out from our reports, but I'm not going to go through them all. But yeah, so we cover a wide area. We've got offices all over the world, and more we're delivering service all over the world for interpreting. So not just in the UK and Europe, we're across the world. This is the picture I was talking about. We do organise just some of the interpreting services we do. We do audits, we do conferences, and a lot of works councils, which is why this is one. And a lot of the works councils aren't in these fantastic facilities like this. They're in hotel rooms where we've got the booths that we move in and everything else. So as a team, we organise all of the equipment for those. We organise the logistics, getting the interpreters to where they need to be, getting the resources there, the equipment, making sure that the clickers work and all that sort of thing. So just a summary of what we do, really. We do most of those different things. Not only do we do interpreting, but we also make sure we've got things like note takers. Very important on a lot of the EWCs. They don't want to spend ages talking, rewriting everything. We do that for them. We might print documents. We might support them with various advice and that. So huge range of services on the works councils. But also we'll do business negotiations. We've done fire training, so that we had one set of interpreters on the moors watching as the fire service put out fires to explain in different countries. So a huge range that we do. One of the things we do I think is important, is working with the interpreters. We value our interpreters and working with them. And we do make sure that we are one team. It's not. I like to think it's not a them and us. It's we work with the interpreters and we make sure that between us we deliver the service our client wants, and that just makes everything so much easier when we're working together. Quality, yeah, we've already talked about it today, how important it is that we have qualified interpreters. We really believe that's so important. We will only work with qualified interpreters who are experienced and trained. We do make sure that they're allowed to work in this country. They've got the authorization. We do check their documents to make sure that their certificates are correct. And we do take up references, because we recognise that what we're saying to our clients is you have to have qualified interpreters. You don't want, you can use anybody who can speak a language, but that's not the right thing to do for what you need and what's right. So we do insist on that, and obviously we do all the confidentiality checks and all that sort of thing, so that's all there. We do spend a lot of time with our clients before we even start. Ours is very much a bespoke service, to make sure that we understand exactly what the client wants, but also what they need. So they may say they want one interpreter all day. We probably will have a chat with them and explain that if they're having simultaneous interpreters, that's not what they want. That's not what they need. What they need is a 2-team to work properly. And we find that we may not be the cheapest, but we do make sure that they understand what they've got. And we are recognising that times are changing and a lot of clients don't want to ship everybody out. So we do have to look at remote interpreting, and we are working on that. We do provide services and work with quality technology. But at the same time, we do, again, spend the time with the client to make sure that they know that is the remote going to give them everything that somebody face-to-face will do. Because there are times when face-to-face is better, because you can bet your bottom dollar that the most important bit of a meeting will be in the coffee break outside rather than what's around the table. And if you haven't got that remote interpreting set right, you're not going to get the best benefit. So we do make sure we work very closely with our clients. But then it comes on to the balancing act. So yes, it's a balancing act, getting everything right with clients and their costs and everything else. And that's what we do. We work with them and with the interpreters. I've had many conversations about can they catch a cheaper flight or everything else. So we work together. And we also recognise that we need linguists of the future. And everything this afternoon has been said about that. We are mainly a translation company. That's where we come back from. We're building our interpreting thing up. So a lot of our work is around just encouraging linguists. It's so important that we have linguists in the future. And, you know, I'm a guide leader. I talk to my guides, and just getting them to try and recognise the importance of it, of a language is really important. So a lot of our project managers and interpreting managers do go out to do sessions with universities. We've got a colleague up in, obviously being close, we're based close to Newcastle, so we regularly go into Newcastle. Another colleague's been to Leeds, all over, and I came down earlier in the year with my bag of Lego to talk about things. So yeah, we think it's important to build that relationship, and for interpreters to understand what it's like working with what we need as an organisation from interpreters. We've also launched this year the RWS Brodie Scholarship Programme, which is to encourage students from lower income families in state schools to study a degree in modern languages. So we've seen right from the start we need to encourage people to do that. So we've got 25 places they've got this year. And we're a gold level sponsor of the World Women in Localization. So that's to sponsor local chapters of the localization company around the world, to make sure that they are they can support women in the linguistic roles. And the Outward Bound Trust is something else. I'm not doing this, but we've got people, ambassadors now, helping the Outward Bound Trust so that people go out and join the Outward Bound courses and talk to the students about their lives while they're climbing up and doing the co-steering and all the other things. I'm not doing that. But yeah, so supporting young people, we think it's really important. And sponsorship as well. We do have a student that comes over every year from Zaud University as an internship. So we recognise this, and we think this facility is just so good. I mean, just being able to see what you've got there is fantastic. And that really is us. I just wish you all the very best for the future. And I think this is so good. Okay.
Thank you, Elaine. We are moving to our last speaker, Evik Sidia, who is the Conference Interpreting Manager at the On-Call Interpreters Limited.
It's so weird because normally I'm behind the scenes organizing the conferences. So as already Eva and Danielle said, I'm the Conference Interpreting Services Manager at On-Call. And I will just go very quickly through a few details about On-Call and then what we've been doing with Metropolitan till now, because I know that we're running late. So On-Call actually was established in 1984. It's actually, I say that it's fate for me because I was born in 1984, so it's perfect. And we currently have 9 offices all over the world. It was established in Melbourne, so we have 5 offices there, 1 in London, 1 in Brussels, 1 in Netherlands, and 1 in Mersin in Turkey. We work, as you can see, with more than 10,000 linguists at the moment. They are all qualified, and we cover events in more than 50 countries. I will try not to be very quick. I understand the interpreters. You can see, I'm going to skip some actually slides on purpose. You can see that we cover most of the services that the LSPs would normally cover, but we have a niche in interpreting, and more specifically in conference interpreting. So we have our own conference interpreting equipment in-house in Brussels, London, and Melbourne. And also we have developed our own telephone interpreting platform, which is called Voice Connect, and our own online platform, video online platform, not simultaneous, just liaison, which is called Face Connect. And we are currently working with a lot of platforms for online simultaneous interpreting that they are, of course, tested. Some of the sectors we work with, I don't think it's very important at the moment. As I said, we cover a lot of conferences. We have an niche in interpreting because our founder is actually an interpreter himself. That's why we focus more on interpreting. So just a few details, and let's move on. The map of on-call in Europe, we covered already events in these countries. I hope in 2020 I will come back for a presentation and it will be all orange, which is also the new black. So the most important thing, I think, it's the requirements we expect from our linguists, which is, of course, a diploma, a BA or a master's degree in the sector. And then we also need an ID, 2 referrals, experience, and the contract that should be signed, and all interpreters and linguists should be very careful with signing a contract with any supplier they're working for. And the next one, that I think that's what we are very proud to be here today because of this cooperation with the London Met and with other universities, is that we've been for the last 4 years, I think, participating in some workshops and talks at the Metropolitan University, and it's mainly about tips that we share with interpreters and translators regarding the market and what to avoid and what to go for in the market in order to make them the preferred linguists. We share case studies, of course, always anonymous. We don't share names of clients or linguists, so they can avoid the same mistakes. And they can actually test their mind in what they would have done. We offer internships. We ask the clients, if possible, mainly in London and Brussels, to organize student visits of the simultaneous interpreters during an event. And this is something we would really like to do in the future again, it's to organize a dummy booth for the interpreters to be able to interpret, the student interpreters, I mean. Last year, I had the honor to be a speaker at the CPD here at Moorgate for business interpreting via technology. And On-Call has already actually participated in research projects in Australia with other universities. Some food for thought about the future. I think we all share the same opinions, actually, and it's amazing to hear that from so many people. It's that, first of all, we had been discussing for the last 10 years about remote and online interpreting, whether it's in the interpreting market or not, and we now all accept that it's the truth. It's the truth. It's part of our life and our business. So we should be all sitting down and discussing how to standardize these platforms, the trainings for the interpreters to be ready to work with these platforms, and how actually, as it was amazing to hear Michalina mentioning artificial intelligence and how we can take advantage before they take advantage of us, of artificial intelligence in the sector. Of course, any research projects and CPDs should be promoted from all of us. And the last thing that it's mainly our responsibility, I mean the company's responsibility, is educating our clients and the interpreters to actually always understand what's the difference between the services and what they should be asking and what they can ask during an event. So that's from me, very quickly. Thank you very much for the honor.
Thank you very much, Evie. I'm looking at the time and it's 5:02, so we overran slightly, but we are really quite on time and all ready for what to come next. And I think I will give the floor to Danielle to conclude our session.
I'm looking at the booth and I'm trying to see if the students have run away after their first day of training or if they are still in the booth being inspired by our delegates. So looking around, I think they look quite happy, but I'm sure that we all look happier around a glass of Prosecco. That's for sure. We've got a party starting at 6 o'clock, as I've mentioned before, and you're all welcome to join us. There are many thanks to say to all of you. First of all, you've managed to be here for 3 hours without a comfort break. I'm sure there's going to be a long queue going out, to the toilet outside, so well done for that. I'd like to really thank Jonathan for the web streaming. I was checking on my phone and looking, all the time, and it's been really spotless, so wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers, but thank you to our interpreters. Shall we give them a round of applause? Thank you to Michel for being here today and for giving us your name to celebrate this space, which is going to be an inspiration for many years to come. So thank you, Michel. You're part of us. You're at the very heart of this space. When we walk in every morning and we see your name, we are inspired. So thank you so much for being a continuous inspiration in our lives. Thank you.
Merci Daniel. Tout le monde m'aimera encore plus si je ne parle pas maintenant.
Okay, so I think we have deserved a glass of Prosecco, which will take place in the courtroom. So I'd like to invite you all to finally leave this room and go to the courtroom where a glass of Prosecco is waiting for you. Thank you.